Chapter 2113, Shengmei Sai. Chapter 2113, Shengmei Sai. Within the towering pagoda, there was an independent world, and at the center of this world were vast plains that overflowed with killing intent. This was the battlefield of the upcoming competition, and around these vast plains were the living quarters of the various large influences. These living quarters included crumbling stone buildings and even cities. The ancient Ian sect alone occupied an entire city. This was also a manifestation of the ancient Ian sect status. In this city, the ancient Ian sect, including the true divinity elders and their followers, were only several hundred people. They only occupied a small portion of this city, and the others in it were all slaves. The Dark Abyss was a world flooded with slaves. The slaves in this city were not just those of the ancient races, but also abyssal demons. A city slave, besides maintaining the operations of the city, also provided a variety of services for the ancient Ian sect. The ancient Ian sect's core disciples and elders could simply do whatever they wished to do. That is the group from 9 Nether Palace. It seems they arrived earlier than we did. The disciples of the ancient Ian sect flew into the air and looked upon the neighboring city. The skies above this city were covered in the faint pressure of a true divinity level abyssal. This pressure wasn't intentionally released, but unwittingly revealed because the true divinity level abyssals in the city were far too strong. This strength gathered in the skies above the city, and the thick demon power eventually formed dark clouds. With 9 Nether Palace and the ancient Ian sect, this was nearly a 2-digit number of true divinity abyssals. The aura they released already formed a force field in the skies, and even if an Empyrean level abyssal were to be placed in that force field of dark clouds, they would still find it hard to withstand. Enough. Everyone calm down. Elder Ian God waved his hand, calling everyone down. Lin Ming found a stone building for himself and started to meditate inside. After being in the Dark Abyss for all these years, he hadn't stopped cultivating once. With so many abyssal influences stationed here, there would inevitably be communication between them, as well as individuals trying to display their own strength and prowess. But no matter what happened outside, Lin Ming remained indifferent to it. Although Lin Ming didn't go out, his reputation still slowly spread. The ancient Ian sect's Council of Elders was unwilling to acknowledge Lin Ming's status as an elder in their hearts. Thus, they didn't give him a special elder title. So, in the outside world, people only knew Lin Ming by the name of the ancient Ian sect's 9th elder. They also knew that this 9th elder wished to marry Deep King Rhodes' holy demoness. In the last 500 years, no abyssal demon had dared to covet her in such a manner. Yet, just before the opening of the demon god's tomb, there was actually a higher abyssal who had such ideas. This would surely be a good show. However, although this news caused vibrant discussion all over, true divinity level abyssals, like the elders of 9 Nether Palace, didn't care much about it at all. To them, whether it was Lin Ming or Deep King Rhodes' holy demoness, they were still Empyrean level abyssals that had yet to reach the true divinity realm. Lin Ming and Deep King Rhodes' holy demoness simply didn't stand on the same level in their eyes. They didn't care too much about this matter. At most, they would go and take a look for fun. Just like a clown that amused the audience before a grand play began, the ancient Ian sect's 9th elder Lin Ming was such a clown in their hearts. What they truly cared about were the 6 higher abyssals that Deep King Rhodes would send to battle. They wanted to know which 6 higher abyssals were being sent out and how many matches they would be able to win. And in fact, Deep King Rhodes had always possessed the overwhelming momentum. Their goal was to win a single match. If they could win 2, then they would be more than overjoyed. However, although they had gathered materials about all the young elders of Deep King Rhodes, they still weren't able to determine which 6 higher abyssals would be sent to participate in the competition. Deep King Rhodes had kept a tight lid on their information. In this aspect, the ancient Ian sect, and 9 Nether Palace were much worse. They only had a limited number of elders they could send out, so it wasn't a choice for them at all. Although most people didn't pay attention to Lin Ming, there was still a small portion of people who investigated his identity. In Deep King Road's main faction, in a room located within a separate time and space, a maid dressed up as a woman of the primal god race slowly walked up. She respectfully said, "Miss, the ancient Ian sect's 9th elder has proposed marriage to you before the opening of the demon god's tomb. We have already looked up some of his information. Would Miss like to take a look?" In front of the maid there was a mysterious woman dressed in black. She stood near a window, faintly gazing off into the distance. Her eyes seemed blank, as if no one could tell where she was looking. But in truth, this was simply because her eyes were far too profound. It was like they were wrapped in a mysterious universe, so deep that no one could find their edges. Her black hair fell down her back like a waterfall of ink. As it poured down her dress, it seemed like a black rose in full bloom. Upon hearing a voice, the black-clothed woman turned around and glanced at the maid. The woman's appearance was simple and otherworldly. Between her eyebrows, 9 flower petals composed a mystical red lotus mark. She was like a goddess exiled from the highest heavens, her body emitting a light, holy aura that made all others feel ashamed at their own inferiority. This woman was Sheng Mei, or she might have been the dark angel that looked completely similar to Sheng Mei. "Miss, the information isn't here." The maid fell to her knees and held out a jade slip in her palms. Sheng Mei's maid came from the primal god race, and this was a demand that Sheng Mei had made. Sheng Mei didn't consider this maid as some sort of mindless slave, and in truth, she even felt some affinity to her. But because of Sheng Mei's aura, the maid couldn't help but fall to her knees and bow her head low, not daring to look at the black-clothed woman before her. Sheng Mei looked at the jade slip and frowned. "The ancient Ian sect's 9th elder. Yes, he is an upper Empyrean, level abyssal." No more fluctuations of emotion crossed Sheng Mei's face, nor did she have any interest in finding out more about this 9th elder. Instead, she simply felt sick and tired of these occurrences. She waved her hand and said, "You may leave." Sheng Mei couldn't even be bothered with looking through this information that her maids and bodyguards collected. When it came to these higher abyssals that wished to marry her, she only considered them a pack of flies. Driving them away or slapping them to death was all she needed to do. And before slapping these flies to death, there was no need for her to probe into their origins or what kind of fly they were. "Yes," the maid quietly put away the jade slip. Toward Sheng Mei, the maid only felt graciousness. She was a slave, and even though her talent was excellent, and she was an extremely expensive slave, she couldn't avoid her tragic fate. However, she had been sent to follow Sheng Mei. Her master hadn't cruelly destroyed her, but instead gave her some resources so that she could cultivate by herself. To the maid, this was the greatest luck of her life. Thus, she was loyal and devoted to Sheng Mei. She bowed, lowering her head as she drew back. And before she turned around, she cast one quick glance at Sheng Mei. She only saw Sheng Mei's profile, an appearance that could be called perfection. However, there was a light trace of sorrow in Sheng Mei's eyes, one that no one could touch upon. This was not the first time that the maid had seen this dim and pale sorrow. In fact, the maid would even occasionally hear Sheng Mei sigh. Although Sheng Mei's voice was low and faint, it was like a pair of invisible hands that easily touched a person's heartstrings. She didn't know why. As the Deep King Road's holy demoness, Sheng Mei's status had reached the peak of the dark abyss. Just what could she possibly be sad about? The maid naturally didn't dare to ask Sheng Mei what she was thinking. She could only faithfully serve Sheng Mei to the best of her abilities and hope that the sorrow would disappear from her face. But as time passed, that gentle sigh and faint sorrow never once left Sheng Mei. In the eyes of outsiders, there had almost never been a smile that lit up Sheng Mei's face. Thus, they thought Sheng Mei was cold and frosty, as arrogant as the stars. But the maid knew that her master wasn't like this. It was just that she had sealed up her heart so no one could open it. Perhaps there would come a day where someone would manage to open it, but the maid had no idea when that would be or who it could be. Days passed, one at a time. The elders of the various influences continued to negotiate and bargain in Deep King Road's main faction. After they roughly set the rules, what followed next was when the specific proportions would be determined. This was also when the various sects would compete. The appointed battle would soon begin. The battlefield would be the vast wild plains that existed between all the various influences' residences. This was destined to be an incomparably intense battle. Chapter 2114 Meeting. Chapter 2114 Meeting. In Deep King Road's towering pagoda, above the wild plains, there were totem poles stabbed into the earth, encircling a demon force field that extended outwards in a radius of 10,000 miles. This force field was filled with thick demonic aura, as if some ancient demon were slumbering here. The disciples of every influence only had to approach this force field to feel a massive pressure. This pressure was mixed with a mighty killing intent. Unless a martial artist was at the world king level or above, it was simply impossible to enter. This is Deep King Road's Deep King Force Field. It is Deep King Road's Great Guardian Array Formation. It was established 10 billion years ago, and for the last 10 billion years, Deep King Road has paid a great price to keep it maintained with blood sacrifices so that it can retain its rank as an extreme true divinity level array formation. If a true divinity level abyssal were to enter this array formation, they would be restricted beneath it. Before entering the Deep King Force Field, the ancient Ian sect's great elder began explaining what it was. Lin Ming looked at the totem poles that surrounded the Great Array Formation. These totem poles weren't inscribed with runes, but had images of all sorts of ancient abyssals carved into them. The images of these demons inherently contained the highest truths of the abyssal laws, and the aura that overflowed from them left one gasping for breath. Upon truly stepping into the force field, Lin Ming could feel his own strength be suppressed a great deal, whether it was mobilizing the energy within his body or utilizing the laws of the world. Everything was affected by the invisible suppression of the force field. If Lin Ming wished to rid himself of this suppression, then he could only break open the force field. But the current Lin Ming didn't possess even the strength to do this. Everyone's strength is suppressed, so the battle is fair. This is to prevent Deep King Road headquarters from being damaged due to the great destruction that could occur when true divinity-level abyssals fight. Lin Ming watched as more and more abyssal influences entered the force field. This force field was like a giant cage, swallowing all those who entered. The group from the ancient Ian sect arrived at their assigned region, and at a place not too far away from them, another crowd of higher abyssals had already arrived. Those are the abyssals from Nine Nether Palace, Ian Light said from beside Elder Ian God, his voice low as he glanced over the several elders of Nine Nether Palace. The many abyssal disciples of Nine Nether Palace also saw the ancient Ian sect arrive. Nine Nether Palace and the ancient Ian sect needed to join forces to resist Deep King Road, but at the same time, they were also fellow competitors. Ha! Elder Ian God, it seems that your ancient Ian sect has trained many masters in preparation for today. The one leading Nine Nether Palace was an old abyssal. He stood 8 feet high and had an emaciated figure. His body was like a bamboo pole with a wooden head attached to one end. As his 8 eyes looked at Lin Ming, all Lin Ming felt was disgust at this odd and ugly-looking creature. This old abyssal was the great elder of Nine Nether Palace. Behind him were 3 relatively young abyssal elders who had clearly reached the true divinity realm. It was obvious that these 3 abyssal elders were the ones sent out by 9 Nether Palace and would also be the ones participating in the competition. When competitors met, sparks would fly on the side of the ancient Ian sect as Ian Light, Ian Moon, and Ian Fire stared at the 3 abyssal elders from 9 Nether Road. A fighting intent sparked in their eyes. The 3 abyssal elders of 9 Nether Palace were different from those of the ancient Ian sect. The 3 elders of the ancient Ian sect were relatively similar in strength, but in 9 Nether Palace, the difference in strength between their 3 elders was extremely great. A young elder named Nether Nihility was the strongest, another was in the middle, and another was the weakest, who was only brought here to make up for numbers. Mortals propose, and the heavens dispose. All I can do, as I wait, is prepare as much as I can. Elder Ian God slowly spoke as he bowed. Ha ha! Elder Ian God is too humble. I heard that not only does your ancient Ian sect have high hopes for the demon god's tomb, but you even want to propose marriage and have one of your sect elders marry Deep King Rhodes' holy demoness. Such courage is something that leaves my 9 Nether Palace quaking in shame at our own inferiority. The voice of 9 Nether Palace's grand elder echoed in the air, so boisterous that one couldn't tell if it was mockery or praise. However, no matter what thoughts he had in his heart, it wasn't important. After 9 Nether Palace's great elder mentioned marriage, the 3 young elders from the ancient Ian sect felt uncomfortable. They were already cursing Lin Ming in their hearts. However, Elder Ian God retained his composure. He slowly said, Deep King Rhodes' holy demoness has informed the world thousands of years ago that any abyssal demon, as long as they can defeat her at the same boundary, may marry her. This is common knowledge, and everyone is free to participate. Our ancient Ian sect also wishes to try our luck, so this is far from any sort of courage. If we lose, then we lose, so what does it matter? Elder Ian God's reply not only lifted the awkward atmosphere, but also opened an escape route for himself later. The great elder of 9 Nether Palace laughed, but just as he was about to say something, sounds began to rise in the distance, ancient demonic sounds that reverberated in the void. As the demonic sounds rose up, the originally bustling scene suddenly quieted down. Everyone looked over, and they could see that in the far-off void, a massive black boat cut into the Deep King Force field like waves in water as it drove forwards. Atop the deck of the bone boat stood 10 higher abyssals. These 10 higher abyssals all had cultivations at the true divinity realm. For an influence to suddenly appear with 10 true divinity level abyssals, the only one that had the background to do this was Deep King Road. It's the elders of Deep King Road. Someone quietly said, suppressing their voice, facing Deep King Road. All of the influences here felt a great pressure. What a terrifying aura domain. I heard that Deep King Road has over 20 true divinity-level abyssals. That is much more than 9 Nether Palace and the ancient Ian sect combined. As Lin Ming heard the discussions of some disciples from smaller influences, he felt a bit wistful. In the dark abyss, if the true divinity-level abyssals of the 6 totem-level influences were added up, then there would be over 80 of them. And there were also true divinity-level abyssals that were in sects other than the 6 totem-level influences, or perhaps they were hidden somewhere else. But altogether, there was at least 100 true divinity-level abyssals in the dark abyss. This was a terrifying number. This was because in the 33 heavens, when it came to martial artists that possessed a combat strength at the true divinity level, even if Lin Ming included himself, there was only 11 to 12 of them. Compared to the dark abyss, this was a difference over 10 times greater. If it weren't for the channel that connected the dark abyss to the 33 heavens being blocked off, then perhaps the 33 heavens would have already been swept away by the dark abyss. Thinking of this, Lin Ming could also feel just how strong the Azura Road Master of 10 billion years past was. Of course, in order for the ancient races of that era to defeat the abyssal demons, they had to pay a tragically deep price. As Lin Ming thought of this, his heart suddenly shook and his pupils shrank. At this moment, he could see that above the bone boat stood the figure of a woman. This woman wore black clothes. As she stood there, she was like the source of all darkness in the universe. Where she stood, the laws assembled themselves into lines that formed black flower petals which gently fluttered down in space, falling onto her clothes before slowly dissipating away. Standing there, she was like a dark enchantress of the night. This woman was Deep King Road's holy demoness. Lin Ming sucked in a deep breath, his thoughts wildly tumbling in his mind. He could feel an inexplicably familiar bloodline connection from Deep King Road's holy demoness. With this connection, he could almost instantly confirm that the Deep King Road holy demoness he saw before him was the same as the sole empress of the 33 heavens, Sheng Mei. Lin Ming knew that when he was at the Sky Spill planet where he had become one with Sheng Mei had left him her primordial Yin and part of her source soul. It was also because of this that he could feel the faint connection between them. At this time, it wasn't just Lin Ming who saw Sheng Mei, but many other abyssals did too. As Deep King Road's holy demoness, Sheng Mei's talent was without peer, and her status was unreachable. Her temperament was as ephemeral as dust, and her appearance far surpassed all others in the dark abyss. Such a proud daughter of heaven made the countless abyssals present drool with desire. So that's Deep King Road's holy demoness. Just seeing her once is better than hearing about her 100 times. That's her. This time, she will likely venture into the demon god's tomb. Also, in terms of cultivation, I heard she is already beginning to attack the true divinity realm. What horrifying talent. She's probably only several tens of thousands of years old. Everyone started to discuss amongst themselves. With so many gazes on her body, Sheng Mei's heart suddenly stirred. For a brief moment, she felt something inexplicable, a strange feeling that passed over her gently and swiftly, one that she couldn't touch her finger on. Inadvertently, she looked towards the direction of the ancient Ian sect. Her eyes stopped upon a vigorous and robust abyssal, one who was covered with black scales and had 2 bone blades jutting out from his elbows. Amongst the other higher abyssals, this abyssal seemed common, but for some unknown reason, as Sheng Mei looked at him, she couldn't help but feel something faintly familiar. Chapter 21:15. Choosing an Opponent. Chapter 21:15. Choosing an Opponent. Strange. I shouldn't have seen him before. Sheng Mei faintly frowned. At this time, the current Lin Ming had already completely concealed his human aura. Lin Ming's true self was within the inner world of his demon avatar, and his aura was completely isolated. Thus Sheng Mei was unable to recognize him. However, because of some inexplicable intuition that couldn't be explained, she was able to instinctively feel that Lin Ming was special. As Lin Ming felt Sheng Mei's gaze touch upon him, he suppressed his thoughts, restraining his emotions so that nothing showed. He deeply hid his aura, not planning to reveal his status to Sheng Mei any time soon. This was because for him, the dark abyss was the lion's den, and if his identity was exposed, then the consequences would be inconceivable. Therefore, even though Lin Ming wanted to believe in Sheng Mei, who knew why she was in the dark abyss, and what her goal was she good or evil? In this completely unsure situation, there was no way that Lin Ming could believe Sheng Mei. After all, in those events that occurred on the Sky Spill planet 12,000 years ago, although Sheng Mei had saved him, everything that she had revealed to him caused him to feel complex emotions of attraction and opposition to this riddle-like woman, as even though he wanted to approach her, he also wished to keep his distance from her. Sheng Mei looked at Lin Ming for a moment and then turned away. She asked one of the abyssals following her, that royal abyssal from the ancient Ian sect, "Who is he?" Reporting to Miss, he is the ninth elder, who was just recently promoted by the ancient Ian sect. He is at the upper Empyrean realm, so it's a bit strange that he became an elder, moreover. The abyssal follower looked at Sheng Mei as he spoke to her, hesitating for a moment. Moreover what? Miss should know that during this competition, one of the elders of the ancient Ian sect wishes to challenge Miss for marriage, and that challenger is this ninth elder. Sheng Mei glanced at Lin Ming with surprise. She had heard about this, but simply didn't care. Thus she never asked for information related to this challenger. But today, after seeing Lin Ming and hearing this so-called challenge again, a bizarre feeling rapidly flew through her thoughts. What is Miss thinking about? Nothing. Sheng Mei shook her head, no longer speaking. This inexplicable flash of intuition left Sheng Mei confused. She racked her thoughts, carefully looking through her past memories for some abyssal demon whose image overlapped with Lin Ming. However, she simply couldn't find anything. She would never have imagined that this royal abyssal, whose bloodline had no problem no matter how much she investigated, would actually be a human. Everyone, let us not speak much nonsense here, and directly start the battle. I will now announce the rules. After all the abyssal demons arrived, a tall and strong abyssal in dark gray metal armor flew up in the skies. Even though he didn't pour any demon energy into his voice, his words still rang loud and clear amongst every present. This tall and strong abyssal was an elder of Deep King Road. Now, all abyssal demons who wish to participate in this competition, step into the center of the field. The tall and strong abyssal roared. On the side of the ancient Ian sect, the three young elders flew out. Then from Nine Nether Palace, Nether Nihility, and the other elders also flew out one after another. Finally, there were the elders of Deep King Road. All the influences were concerned about which 6 elders Deep King Road would send out. Many abyssals looked with wide eyes. They watched as a black beam of light came shooting down from the black bone boat that the group from Deep King Road had come in on. From this beam of light, a horrifying abyssal aura swelled outwards. These were the elders of Deep King Road. Deep Child. The first elder that flew down from Deep King Road caused everyone's hearts to shake because this elder called Deep Child was at the middle true divinity level. Whether it was the ancient Ian sect or Nine Nether Palace, the young elders or elders in the prime of their youth that they sent out for this venture into the demon god's tomb were all at the lower true divinity level. But Deep King Road had already sent out a true divinity level abyssal whose true potential was yet to be dug out. From this alone the disparity between the sects could be seen. With the appearance of a single Deep Child, Nine Nether Palace, and the ancient Ian sect's momentum was all suppressed. Fortunately, following that, the other candidates from Deep King Road were all at the lower true divinity level. Deep Moon, Deep Glory, Deep Echo, Deep Solitary. An abyssal familiar with the high-level elders of Deep King Road began to announce their names as they flew down, but when he came to the 6th person, he froze. Wait a moment, this is... How could it be her? As the abyssal demons saw a woman in black clothes come fluttering down from the skies, all of their eyes popped open. They never imagined that the 6th competition candidate would not be one of their elders, but actually the holy demoness. Deep King Road's holy demoness. Is she going to compete? But her cultivation has yet to reach the true divinity level. Without having reached the true divinity level, can one challenge true divinity abyssals? The eyes of all abyssals focused on Sheng Mei. The aura that she exuded loudly declared that she had 1 foot in the threshold of true divinity. But no matter how close one was to true divinity, someone that wasn't at true divinity was someone that wasn't at true divinity. The gap between an Empyrean and a true divinity was vast beyond compare, and for an Empyrean to fight a true divinity was beyond difficult. In the past, Many influences already knew that Deep King Road's holy demoness possessed formidable talent, and that she was invincible among those at the same boundary. After all, no matter how many outstanding abyssals wished to dual cultivate with Deep King Road's holy demoness, all of them were in the end mercilessly beaten to the ground. But no matter how exaggerated the legends of Deep King Road's holy demoness were, no one would have expected that on this day she would be chosen to fight on behalf of Deep King Road. Could she, at the limit of an Empyrean, now possess the ability to fight a true divinity? The abyssals present felt this all unbelievable. But no one felt that Deep King Road's holy demoness would come out and participate in this struggle for benefits of the demon god's tomb if she didn't have full confidence in her abilities. If she wasn't, then she would be far too stupid. It had to be known that the ancient Aeon sect and 9 Nether Palace had the ability to choose who their opponent was, and could even repeat a challenge against someone. If the holy demoness was too weak, then the ancient Aeon sect and 9 Nether Palace's 6 elders could simply all choose her and win 6 matches like this. This was a naturally impossible matter. As the abyssals present realized this, their vision as they looked at Shang Mei changed. It turned to awe, reverence, jealousy, even obsession. All sorts of complicated emotions filled the hearts of the abyssals present. And at this time, the host of this great competition spoke out and interrupted the thoughts of the crowd. We shall now begin. The elders of the ancient Aeon sect and 9 Nether Palace, you may now choose your opponents. As the host spoke, the ancient Aeon sect and 9 Nether Palace immediately quieted down. The choice of opponent was naturally extremely important. In particular, due to the rules, Deep King Road's elders could be chosen multiple times. All 6 elders could choose the weakest warrior of Deep King Road. As for the strongest Deep Child, no one had to fight him. But the key question here was which one of these 6 elders of Deep King Road was the weakest. Besides the obvious answer that was the basically invincible Deep Child, the elders of the ancient Aeon sect and 9 Nether Palace began to look over their possible opponents. Between every opening of the demon god's tomb, there was a vast span of time. Thus, the warriors that every influence sent out would be different each time. In addition, with Deep King Road's tight intelligence security, it was simply impossible to know the depths of Deep King Road's elders. The elders of the ancient Aeon sect and 9 Nether Palace could only make speculations based upon the auras and law fluctuations of these higher abyssals, as well as using the intuition of a martial artist. Aeon Light, have you chosen? On the ancient Aeon sect's side, the great elder asked out loud. Aeon Light pondered for a moment more. Then, a cold light flashed in his eyes. He finally looked at Shang Mei and said, I have chosen. I choose the holy demoness. Aeon Light knew that Shang Mei likely wasn't weak, and if she dared to come and compete, then she naturally had hidden cards in her hands. But when compared to the other true divinity-level elders, Shang Mei gave off a slightly weaker feeling. After all, most people who jumped ranks to fight were barely able to do so. The great elder frowned, but didn't oppose. He turned to another elder and asked, Aeon Fire, what about you? Aeon Fire thought deeply for a moment. Then he said, although it doesn't seem honorable, I plan on choosing the holy demoness also. She should be the weakest. Chapter 21:16. The battle begins. Chapter 21:16. The battle begins. The choices of the ancient Aeon sect were soon announced. Aeon Light and Aeon Fire both chose Shang Mei. As for Aeon Moon, after considering his options, he chose another seemingly weaker elder. It wasn't a wise decision to place all their eggs in the same basket. If Shang Mei were truly incomparably powerful, or if there were some trap laid in place for them, then they might lose all their matches. And in a stroke of coincidence, 9 Nether Palace also made a similar choice. 2 elders chose Shang Mei, and as for the strongest nether nihility, he chose another opponent. In other words, after all choices were made, Sheng Mei alone would have to face 4 opponents. According to the rules of the competition, Sheng Mei would fight 1 person a day with the other 2 matches interspersed within, up until the competition ended. Miss, for Abyssals have chosen you, as the ancient Ian sect and 9 Nether Palace made their choices. Sheng Mei had already returned to the bone boat to sit in meditation. Her maid hurriedly ran inside. Sheng Mei's eyebrows gently arched up. She took a slow breath and said, "I understand." To be chosen by so many Abyssals at the same time was already well within Sheng Mei's expectations. Her cultivation was the lowest, and she was also a woman. Thus to others it would make her seem the easiest to deal with. "Miss, then you—" The maid looked at Sheng Mei with some worry. Sheng Mei had been good to her. Thus she naturally didn't hope that Sheng Mei would have to engage in a revolving battle with so many opponents. After all, a high-intensity battle at the true divinity level wasn't something that the average person could withstand. "I'm fine. You can draw back," Sheng Mei said. The maid silently withdrew. According to the rules of the competition, the first fight on the battlefield would start 2 hours from now. Sheng Mei continued to sit in meditation for an hour. Then she stood up, bathed, and changed her clothes. She took off her glorious black dress and exchanged it for a suit of black battle armor. Then she picked up a sword. This sword was wrapped in black silk. It appeared ancient and filled with the endless flow of time. Raising this sword, Sheng Mei walked outside. At this time, in the wild plains battlefield, a massive black disc was floating in the air. This black disc was called the Deep King Wheel and was one of the most precious treasures within Deep King Road. It was a giant array disc passed down in Deep King Road from 10 billion years past. The Deep King Wheel could be made both small and large. Now, it had been expanded and used as the stage on which these true divinity abyssals would compete. When the Deep King Wheel connected with the 12 surrounding totem poles, it formed an indestructible force field that could withstand the impact of a battle between true divinity-level martial artists. At this time, all the influences arrived at their respective positions, looking forwards to this battle. They also knew that the ancient Ian sect and 9 Nether Palace had made their choices. 4 elders had chosen Sheng Mei. Such methods earned the contempt and disdain of many Abyssals. But in order to win, in order to grasp more advantages, it was also indisputable for 9 Nether Palace and the ancient Ian sect to be unscrupulous in their methods. Sheng Mei was the proudest daughter of the Dark Abyss. She had countless admirers, fans, and worshippers, and even though these Abyssals clearly knew it was impossible to obtain her, they were still willing to support her. At this time, Elder Ian Light already stood on the Deep King Wheel. The hisses of numerous Abyssals filled the air. A true divinity fighting an Empyrean. It seems he doesn't care about face at all. An Abyssal disciple from Deep King Road shouted. There were also many Abyssals from small influences that joined in. Although these small influences weren't large, they still had the backing of Deep King Road, thus they didn't fear offending the ancient Ian sect. He seems to be called Ian Light or something. His age is already countless times higher than that of Deep King Road's holy demoness. An old fogey actually chose a young junior woman as his opponent. Whether it is in age or cultivation, he is higher than her. I can't believe he still has the gall to stand there. More of Sheng Mei's admirers called out. Although Ian Light was called a young elder, this was only in comparison to other true divinity-level Abyssals. Any true divinity that hadn't yet lived for 50 million years could be called a young true divinity. For instance, this was also true for Divine Dream. In fact, Divine Dream had been limited by the inheritances and resources available in the divine realm. If she were born amongst the Spiritas, then with her talent, she would have long since broken into true divinity, facing the raucous boos of the crowd. Even though Ian Light had thick skin. His face was still darker than well water. This pile of garbage from Deep King Road. After a while, I will ruthlessly stomp upon that perfect demoness in your hearts, so that you will never scream like this again. As Ian Light thought this, a cold light flashed in his eyes. What a pity that my cultivation is at the true divinity level. Even if I defeat this demoness, I still cannot dual cultivate with her. Otherwise, I would be able to recklessly enjoy this top-quality woman as much as I wanted. If I were able to do so, it would also be greatly beneficial to my cultivation. Ian Light subconsciously licked his lips, and at this time his mind stirred, and he looked up into the skies. From high in the skies, faint killing intent came slowly dripping down. It's Deep King Road's holy demoness. She finally came out. As an abyssal shouted out loud, more and more abyssals looked towards the bone boat. They saw a woman in black battle armor fly downward, her black hair falling like a waterfall around her as she grasped a sword. She gently fell atop the Deep King wheel. Her steps were light, not even touching the ground, only leaving behind faint ripples in the void. She held her sword. She didn't look at her opponent, Ian Light, but swept her eyes over the crowd, as if she were searching for someone. There were tens of thousands of abyssals all around the battlefield, but she immediately found who she was looking for, and that was Lin Ming. Sheng Mei's gaze paused upon Lin Ming for a short period of time, as if she were considering him for a moment. Then her eyes left him, and this brief moment of attention caused Lin Ming to suck in a light breath. Sheng Mei's intuition was far too horrifying. Even though he had concealed himself to this degree, she could still feel something out of the ordinary with him. This woman was simply filled with riddles. Sheng Mei, just what are you doing here? And between you and that mysterious woman from 10 billion years ago, just how are you related? Lin Ming's gaze fell upon the point between Sheng Mei's eyebrows. Those 9 bright red flower petals aroused particular attention. Each flower petal was perfect. This was a sign of the grand reincarnation, art's 9th revolution. Without a doubt, during these years since Sheng Mei left, she had already completed the 9th reincarnation and had become thoroughly aware of the laws of life and death. She had reached perfection in the grand reincarnation art. The heaven-defying aspect of the grand reincarnation art lay in its ability to constantly consolidate the foundation, purify the body, and enhance talent. And after reaching the perfection of 9 revolutions, there would be a qualitative change. Without a doubt, there was no comparing the Sheng Mei that Lin Ming had first met to the Sheng Mei of today. If the current Sheng Mei were to participate in the final trial now, she could easily obtain a completion rate above 90 or 95. This already far surpassed the results that Lin Ming obtained the first time he participated in the final trial. This was the capital Sheng Mei would use to fight a true divinity, while she was at the limit of an empyrean. At this time, Sheng Mei drew out her sword. This was an oddly shaped sword. It was pitch black but illuminated with a faint brilliance. It wasn't made from metal, and while it resembled jade a little, it wasn't jade at all. In truth, it was a blade sculpted from bone. This was a bone sword. On this bone sword there were still residual runes of the great Tao. These runes weren't engraved afterwards, but already existed on the bone to begin with. In other words, this sword was made from the bone of some peerless master. The sword exuded an aura even above that of Lin Ming's black dragon spear. It nearly surpassed the level of a true divinity spirit treasure. Lin Ming found it hard to imagine just where this sword came from, or what bone it was forged from. This bone sword, is it made from the bone of a demon or the bone of a man? This thought flashed through Lin Ming's mind. If a bone was capable of being forged into such a demonic sword, then he feared this person, or Abyssal must have had strength beyond divinity. Sheng Mei lifted her sword and pointed it straight at Ian Light. This bone sword was slightly curved up, and the sword ridge was narrow and thin. It resembled a sword and saber at the same time. Facing this sword, Ian Light felt a vague pressure. This weapon was clearly far superior to his own. Ian Light took out a hammer from his spatial ring. This warhammer was pure black. It was only a lower true divinity spirit treasure. Although abyssal demons were inherently powerful beings, their refining ability was limited. Ian Light's weapon simply wasn't able to compare with Sheng Mei's. However, to use a hammer to fight a bone sword, in terms of weapon weight, Ian Light had an overwhelming advantage. Thus, at the start, he planned to rely upon this strength to win. He didn't underestimate Sheng Mei. With his first strike, he already came smashing down like a thunderbolt. Ha! Ian Light roared. His muscles bulged out and his hammer came pounding down. Demon power swept through the world. Even with the suppression of the Deep King force field, this hammer strike was still enough to shake the world. Even the Deep King will gently tremble. In this moment, Sheng Mei moved. Her body was like weightless smoke as she fluttered backwards. No matter who was watching, it appeared impossible for Sheng Mei's strength to compare with Ian Light's. In order to fend off a frontal attack like this, using speed to battle was the best method. However, when Sheng Mei drew backwards, she suddenly felt the surrounding space tighten and lock down around her. A massive strength pushed down upon her, covering her like a cage. Sheng Mei's eyebrow arched up. Ian Light laughed. This is my war demon force field. How could I possibly let you escape? Prepare to die. Bang! A hammer came smashing down, like the arrival of the apocalypse. The entire abyssal audience, especially Sheng Mei's fans, let out cries of alarm. A horrifying explosion rang out like peals of thunder. Black light slashed out, making it hard to determine what occurred. After the light faded away, the entire Deep King will tilted slightly from the strike of Ian Light's hammer. From this alone, it could be seen how terrifying this strike was. But beneath that hammer, Sheng Mei hadn't been severely wounded. She hadn't avoided, nor had she even used the bone sword. In that moment, from behind Sheng Mei, a pair of black wings had burst outwards. These wings wrapped around her body like a shield of black feathers. And above this shield of feathers, mystical runes appeared, some light and some dark. The feather shield and runes had blocked the onslaught of the hammer. As the abyssals watched this, many of them felt their jaws drop down. They had guessed that Sheng Mei was strong, but they never imagined she would have the strength to directly face Ian Light. Chapter 21:17 Wings of an Angel. Chapter 21:17 Wings of an Angel. No matter who was watching, everyone believed that Sheng Mei was a martial artist who excelled in speed and use of skills. Even if Lin Ming knew she was strong, he still found it mind-boggling to think that she could use her mortal body to directly face off against the raging strength of an abyssal demon. But the truth was placed in front of him because she had frontally blocked Ian Light's attack. Ian Light looked at Sheng Mei, his dark brown pupils flashing with disbelief. A woman at the limits of an Empyrean had actually managed to block his incredibly heavy hammer. The bloodline of a dark angel is originally a top bloodline of all abyssal demons, and their bloodline is formed from their condensed bloodline essence. Beneath the battle stage, an old abyssal slowly spoke, his dirty eyes alight with praise. This Deep King Road, holy demoness, likely experienced lucky chances that allowed her to temper her wings, and now with her wings closed around her, it is no different from a true divinity-level spirit shield. After unfurling them, they can become true divinity-level blades. This holy demoness was originally at the limits of an Empyrean, just half a step away from the true divinity level, so even with her wings, she shouldn't have been able to block Ian Light's attack. But with her laws, she was able to make up for this. The laws that the old man spoke of were the runes that glittered on Sheng Mei's wings. Beside the old man, many abyssals were flabbergasted as they heard this. This Deep King Road, holy demoness, possessed a powerful body transformation technique, and her laws were also formidable. It seemed that all advantages were taken in by her. This was far too terrifying. Bang! Ian Light and Sheng Mei separated. Sheng Mei drifted back like a black butterfly, and Lin Ming could see a faint trace of blood on her wings. That strike just now had caused Sheng Mei to receive a minor wound, but to her, this wound wasn't anything at all. Ian Light roared out loud and hurled himself towards Sheng Mei. With his previous strike failing to achieve victory, Ian Light didn't hesitate to use an even stronger attack. Demon King Extermination. Ian Light's body gushed out with thick demon power, like roiling clouds of smoke. Even though this terrifying strength was suppressed by the deep King force field, it still easily pierced through the void and came crashing down on Sheng Mei like landslides and tsunamis. Every wisp of power transformed into a fierce demon. For a time, 10,000 demons roared out loud, thirsting to destroy the heavens and ruin the earth. The might behind this attack was more than twice as powerful as Ian Light's previous attack. After all, Ian Light was a true divinity-level abyssal. Although he wasn't considered too strong amongst true divinity abyssals, he still had his own hidden cards and all-out techniques. To defeat an abyssal like him wouldn't be easy at all. At this time, Sheng Mei also moved. The runes on her body started to radiate light, and the mark between her eyebrows began to grow. Surging demon power gathered behind her, condensing into a totem that was like a red lotus in full bloom. Then Sheng Mei struck out her sword. The bone sword in her hand seemed to swallow all light, as if it were the only existence in this world. Sword after sword. Every sword was simple and true. But as the sword light came slashing down, a deep red lotus bloomed on it, shining with a bewitching light. The total strength behind this sword light seemed far weaker than Ian Light's Demon King Extermination, but when it cut into those fierce demons, a strange scene occurred. The black sword light carried with it an aura of death that seemed to swallow all, as well as a concept of endlessness, filling it with strength and making it difficult to eliminate. Ian Light's Demon King Extermination was like a vast wave that blotted out the skies, but Sheng Mei's sword light forcefully broke into that wave and tore open a gap. The sword light was like a hissing viper, shooting straight towards Ian Light's heart. What? Ian Light's pupils shrank, and he rapidly retreated. However, the angle of this sword was far too cunning. Even though Ian Light activated his force field to suppress it, this sword light still pierced through his protective demon power and ripped through his scales. Puff! Ian Light spat out a mouthful of black blood. He flew backwards and crashed heavily onto the Deep King wheel. He used his hammer to prop himself up and avoid the shame of falling down where he was. As he looked at Sheng Mei, his eyes were filled with disbelief. He never imagined that while Sheng Mei's sword light was clearly less formidable than his Demon King Extermination, it would still rip through his own technique and also wound him. This was also something that the many abyssal elders beneath the stage still weren't able to see clearly. And the one who saw most clearly was Lin Ming. This was because in that move Sheng Mei just used, Lin Ming also understood the concepts and laws within it. The black sword light contained an aura that could swallow all. Those were the death laws. As for that relatively small and weak sword light that was able to break through the much stronger Demon King Extermination, that was because of the laws of endlessness contained within it. When both were joined together, this was the Holy Scripture. It was true that the demon power in Sheng Mei's body was inferior to that of Ian Light, but her laws were able to make up for the disparity in strength and allow her to reverse all odds. Without a doubt, the Sheng Mei that had reached perfection in the grand reincarnation art now stood at an unimaginably high height of the laws. This was true even for Lin Ming. If Lin Ming were to be compared to Sheng Mei, then he would win if they compared how broad the laws they studied were. But if they were only comparing their comprehensions of the Holy Scripture laws, then Lin Ming was far from being able to match Sheng Mei. Moreover, Lin Ming also felt that because of the bone sword in Sheng Mei's hands, she was able to display the greatest strength of her laws, as if the runes inherent on that bone sword were the ultimate manifestation of the Holy Scripture. This was a bone sword that nearly surpassed the rank of a true divinity spirit treasure, and with those Holy Scripture runes marked into it, a sudden thought crossed Lin Ming's mind. This bone sword, could it have been made with the bones of a mortal sovereign? Lin Ming was panic-stricken to think this. The immortal sovereign was one of the two great leaders of the 33 heavens 10 billion years ago. He was a peerless existence that was in no way inferior to the Azura Road Master. When Lin Ming listened to Clear and Ink speak, it seems that the Azura Road Master had yet to die, but had simply fallen into a dormant state for various reasons. And as for the place of this dormancy, that was a mystery. The Azura Road Master was alive, but not only was the immortal sovereign dead, even his bones had been turned into swords. With such a possibility swimming in his mind, Lin Ming felt saddened. But at the same time, he was also increasingly confused about Sheng Mei's status. And at this time, atop the Deep King Wheel, the battle between Sheng Mei and Ian Light continued to rage on, becoming increasingly fierce. After Sheng Mei took the upper hand, she didn't give Ian Light any chance to recover. Her body rushed forwards like surging black smoke, and the sword in her hand danced in the air. Sword light fell down like rain, dense and fleeting. Every sword light contained the life laws of growing endlessly, unable to be destroyed. At the same time, these sword lights contained the death laws, easily melting apart any demon power it contained. Whether it was Ian Light's protective demon essence or the attack he sent out, all of it was pierced through by Sheng Mei's sword light. The strength Sheng Mei used was always weaker than Ian Light's, but from what everyone could see, Sheng Mei was the one winning. Ian Light continued to use method after method, but not only were his abilities all countered by Sheng Mei, but he instead gained more wounds. Ian Light's energy slowly turned chaotic. He was consuming more energy than Sheng Mei, and he also had more injuries than her. But as for Sheng Mei, she was neither slow nor fast, her breath steady, as if she could continue to fight on, for forever. With the fight having reached this step, the result was already decided. Now, it was only a matter of time until Sheng Mei's victory. All the Abyssals watching were shocked. Although they expected Sheng Mei was strong, they never imagined that Sheng Mei would suppress Ian Light in this battle. She was a powerhouse at the limits of an Empyrean. At most, she could be considered as just having a single step in the threshold of true divinity. There was still a massive difference until she was truly at the true divinity level. If she could fight a lower true divinity with her cultivation, then what would happen once she became a true divinity level abyssal? Wouldn't she be able to fight an upper true divinity? At the true divinity level, jumping 2 small boundaries to battle was an unimaginable feat. This meant that in the future Sheng Mei would have a small chance of stepping beyond divinity. Even if she didn't rely on the totem-level abyssal inheritance of the abyssal ritual, she could still step beyond divinity. And what if the abyssal ritual was added on? Then, just what would her future be like? The abyssals that watched from the side simply couldn't imagine it. At this time, the battle on the stage was reaching its finale. When Ian Light used Demon King Extermination one more time, he was already completely spent, and his technique was once again broken apart by Sheng Mei's Holy Scripture laws. Puff! A dark and profound sword light pierced through Ian Light's chest. Blood shot out, and he was sent flying backwards before crashing onto the Deep King Wheel. Ian Light had been defeated. Chapter 2118. The number 1 elite beneath heaven. Chapter 2118. The number one elite beneath heaven. First match, Victor, Deep King Road's Holy Demoness. As the elder responsible for presiding over this competition announced the results, the entire audience of Abyssals was filled with disbelief, all of them at a loss for words. Everyone knew that it was impossible for Deep King Road to send out the Holy Demoness in a situation where they didn't have absolute faith in success, and thus allow the ancient Ian sect and 9 Nether Palace to obtain successive victories against her. But when the result of the first battle was truly announced, all of them struggled to accept what occurred. Without the aid of any array formations, puppets, or anything else like that, Deep King Road's Holy Demoness had managed to directly defeat Ian Light with just herself. In the Dark Abyss, it had been billions of years since someone at the limits of an Empyrean who was capable of defeating a lower true divinity had appeared. What a terrifying woman! During this venture into the demon god's tomb, if she can pass the rest of the abyssal ritual and obtain the strength of the totem abyssal sealed within, then her future strength can only be imagined. The Abyssals seemed to realize that in the group Deep King Road sent into the demon god's tomb, Sheng Mei might be the lead. Deep King Road would surely do everything in their power to forge Sheng Mei into a beyond divinity level powerhouse, and she indeed possessed the capital to become such. Within the next several tens of thousands of years, this holy demoness will surely become one of those most formidable existences in the abyss. To think that just several hundred years ago, there were still higher abyssals that wished to defeat her and dual cultivate with her. Just laughable. Who actually has the qualifications? That's right. Her status and talent are at unreachable heights, and there is no higher abyssal capable of comparing with her. Moreover, she is far too cold. I fear she won't lower herself to be with anyone. What a top-grade woman. If I could obtain her then, I would be willing to die. If I could dual cultivate with her, then it would be an unimaginable benefit to my strength. The surrounding abyssals started to discuss. After this fight, Sheng Mei had undoubtedly become the number one proud elite below the heavens. At this time, there were also some people that remembered the ancient Ian sect and the ancient Ian sect's 9th elder. They subconsciously glanced at Lin Ming, who would soon fight Sheng Mei. They wanted to find some sort of panicked expression in this unlucky elder who had chosen to fight Sheng Mei. Unfortunately, they were left disappointed. To their surprise, Lin Ming sat in meditation, his breath calm, as if the shocking battle on the stage had nothing to do with him. Is this the boy of the same level who wishes to challenge Deep King Road's Holy Demoness? He can still sit there? That's right, he is the ancient Ian sect's 9th elder. He should only be sitting there pretending to be calm, right now, to maintain some sense of momentum. But if he can still pretend like this, that must mean he has some level of ability, otherwise there would be a problem with his head. Several hundred years ago, there were such blindly arrogant higher abyssals who desired to challenge Sheng Mei. Although they all knew Sheng Mei possessed incredible strength, they still insisted on fighting her because of their extreme self-confidence. Before they fought her, they were still confident because they didn't know their own weight. In the end, they were severely wounded by Sheng Mei, and there were even some that were crippled. But now, even if there was yet another blindly arrogant challenger, they still shouldn't think that their strength could compare with that of a true divinity-level abyssal. Even a true divinity was defeated by Sheng Mei. One would have to carefully consider just how strong they were in front of a true divinity, and then one could extrapolate the result of the battle from this. Yet not only was this 9th elder not in despair, but he sat calmly where he was. This left those watching him surprised. I hear he isn't even at the limits of an Empyrean, and his cultivation is lower than Deep King Road's Holy Demoness. He is likely at the upper Empyrean level, or the peak of the middle Empyrean level. If his cultivation is lower than Sheng Mei's, just what point is there in fighting? Some abyssals spoke in hushed voices. At this time, Sheng Mei's gaze fell upon Lin Ming. As Lin Ming sat there in meditation, his breath, his heartbeat, the revolution of energy within his body, everything was sharply captured by Sheng Mei's eyes. From aura alone, it was clear that Lin Ming wasn't faking being calm. This left Sheng Mei puzzled. Just where did this ninth elder of the ancient Ian sect originate from? Lin Ming felt Sheng Mei's gaze on him. He opened his eyes, slightly, and looked back at her with confidence. He had been adjusting his condition all this time, making sure he was in his peak state, because he had a feeling that this upcoming battle with Sheng Mei would not be easy at all. Not to mention Sheng Mei's formidable strength and her higher cultivation. There was also the fact that Lin Ming had taken the form of an abyssal right now. In his current condition, the strength he could display was limited. Lin Ming's true self was actually located in his abyssal form's inner world, although his true self and avatar could interlink their strength together. It would be difficult for him to display the strength of his true self in a manner where Sheng Mei couldn't identify him. Lin Ming had a faint premonition that between him and Sheng Mei, perhaps this battle was already predestined. In all the years that he had known Sheng Mei, their relationship had not been one of lovers, but of enemies and friends. They fought each other and confronted each other. From the final trial of the Azure Road to grasping the principles atop the Akashic Dream Universe's shrine platforms, to being hunted down to the Sky Spill continent 12,000 years ago, and finally now, Lin Ming took a deep breath and closed his eyes, entering an ethereal state. However, compared to Lin Ming, Ian Fire could no longer remain composed, because the match he chose was Sheng Mei. In terms of strength, Ian Fire was around the same as Ian Light. If Sheng Mei had defeated Ian Light so easily, then if he were to go up on stage, his chances were likely no better. This woman is too terrifying. Ian Fire's complexion turned ugly. Your battle with her will commence 3 days from now. You must do everything you can to succeed. The intensity of her energy is inferior to your own, but she surpasses you in the laws. When you fight her, you must make sure your attacks aren't spread out and blotting out the skies, but more precise and focuses instead. Elder Ian got advised. By this time, no one in the ancient Ian sect cared about Lin Ming anymore. They were originally afraid that Lin Ming would shame them, but now even Ian Light had lost. If an Empyrean like Lin Ming were to lose, no matter how miserably he lost, it couldn't be any more disgraceful than what occurred. These true divinity battles continued at a pace of 1 per day. After Sheng Mei's battle ended, the second battle was 9 Nether Palace's Nether Nihility against another elder of Deep King Road. Nether Nihility was the most famous and prestigious abyssal amongst the elders of 9 Nether Palace that were in the prime of their youth. He was the strongest abyssal that 9 Nether Palace sent out, and also the one with the greatest potential. When he was choosing opponents, he didn't choose Sheng Mei. Because he didn't know how strong she was, he chose another lower true divinity instead. But now Nether Nihility somewhat regretted his decision. He sorely wished to fight Sheng Mei, to battle this proud child of heaven. However, when he stood atop the Deep King Wheel and looked towards the direction of Deep King Road, he didn't see Sheng Mei's figure. Sheng Mei hadn't appeared at all, clearly not interested in this battle. Nether Nihility frowned. It was clear that in her eyes he wasn't worth paying attention to. Nether Nihility's match ended with his victory. Although his victory hadn't come easily, he wasn't flustered at all. Everything occurred in order. Such a result was within the expectations of many abyssals. Nether Nihility was truly strong, but to the people of the ancient Ian sect, the pressure on them was far too great. 9 Nether Palace had already won, but whether their ancient Ian sect could win was still an unknown. If they were to lose all 3 matches, then during this venture into the demon god's tomb, they would surely fall into an extremely passive position. And then, in the 3rd match, it was Sheng Mei once again. Sheng Mei's opponent was from 9 Nether Palace, and her opponent was also the weakest true divinity in 9 Nether Palace. Nine Nether Palace's elders were different from those of the ancient Ian sect. Of the three true divinity-level abyssals they sent out, Nether Nihility was the absolute strongest. Another was in the middle, and as for the third, he was the weakest. His age was slightly higher than it should be, and his strength was also lacking. He had just been brought here to make up numbers. When Sheng Mei and this weakest true divinity-level abyssal of Nine Nether Palace stood on the Deep King Will together, no one thought that this elder of Nine Nether Palace had even the most minute possibility of winning. Those from the ancient Ian sect could only hope that this weak elder would be able to consume a bit of Sheng Mei's strength, so that Ian Fire's chances of defeating Sheng Mei would be a bit higher. Because what followed next would be the battle between Ian Fire and Sheng Mei. However, no one thought that as this weakest true divinity-level elder stepped on stage, he would simply say, "I admit defeat." This left many watching Abyssal speechless. Although everyone could see what the result would be, this was still a true divinity against an Empyrean. A true divinity had actually admitted defeat without regard for their honor. This was simply a joke. And the elder of Nine Nether Palace admitting defeat like this caused Ian Fire's complexion to become increasingly ugly, because the next one up would be him. And Sheng Mei hadn't even used up any of her strength. Chapter 21:19, Unfathomable. Chapter 21:19, Unfathomable. Those old Nine Nether Palace bastards. The abyssal elders of the ancient Ian sect grimaced, their complexions darkening. Nine Nether Palace and the ancient Ian sect were allies, but they still competed against each other. After the Nine Nether Palace elder admitted defeat against Sheng Mei, it was the ancient Ian sect's Ian Fire's turn to step onto the stage. Since Nine Nether Palace knew that they were going to fight Sheng Mei first, they naturally weren't willing to smooth the road for the ancient Ian sect. If they had to lose, then they would rather everyone lose together. Each battle was separated by a single day. To a true divinity-level abyssal, a single day was as fast as a blink of an eye. The abyssals present waited for a day. Then Sheng Mei's third match began, and her opponent was Ian Fire. It had already been 2 days since Sheng Mei's battle with Ian Light. She hadn't consumed much to begin with, and since she had an additional day to recover, she had already returned to her peak condition. "Elder Ian Fire, you can do it! I believe in you!" On the side of Nine Nether Palace, someone shouted out loud. The elder who said this could be considered to have some friendship with the ancient Ian sect, but the truth was that this so-called friendship was the type where they cheerily laughed, at some times while holding a knife ready to stab them in the back, or gloat over the misfortune of others. Ian Fire froze where he was as he heard this. His face flushed red, and he glared at the elder who spoke, icily saying, "Humph, just you wait and see." As Ian Fire came on stage, he was well aware of his own strength and knew that this battle would be difficult. Even so, he didn't feel that his loss was already determined. This was because Sheng Mei had defeated Ian Light utilizing her own ingenuity. In his eagerness to win, Ian Light had used several incredibly mighty skills, but all of them had been countered by Sheng Mei using a small price. As such, Ian Light had consumed more and more energy, while Sheng Mei hadn't used up much strength at all. From that point on, he had been doomed to defeat. Thus, Ian Fire planned to compete with Sheng Mei in a battle of skills and delay for as much time as possible. He believed that with his true divinity boundary, the foundational base of his energy was far deeper than hers. At the end, he would be the one still standing. This was what Ian Fire had planned, and also what he would do. Every true divinity had their own methods, and Ian Fire was no mud that would be freely beaten around by others. After he stepped on stage, black abyssal flames ignited all over the Deep King Wheel. These were demonic flames known for being able to annihilate all, as well as Ian Fire's force field. Do you all really think I will lose? I will win and show you all. Ian Fire's eyes burst out with a brilliant fighting spirit As the abyssal flame force field lit up all around him, his confidence rapidly rose. Generally speaking, if any abyssal demon below the true divinity level were to enter this abyssal flame force field, then they would be charred to ashes. But let alone Ian Fire. Even a true divinity level abyssal would have to consume a massive amount of strength in these flames. What Ian Fire wanted to do was burn up Sheng Mei's strength. From the start of the battle, Ian Fire had no intention of directly facing Sheng Mei. He increased the distance between them, delaying for time to consume her strength. Sheng Mei's several sword lights were all blocked by Ian Fire using his flame shield, and then burned away. The more Ian Fire fought, the more confident he was, and maintaining a force field actually didn't use up much strength. This was one of the advantages of force field skills. This Ian Fire is a true divinity abyssal, yet he uses such a pathetic tactic to fight against an Empyrean-level abyssal. Although it is disgraceful, any tactic that wins is a good tactic. Ian Fire doing this is the indisputably correct choice. The result of this battle is a bit confusing. I wonder just who will be able to last until the end. As many abyssals discussed amongst themselves, they all realized this would be a protracted battle. This was because Ian Fire wasn't willing to directly confront Sheng Mei. And if two true divinity-level opponents were to fight like this, they could go on for several days and nights. However, as everyone was thinking this, Lin Ming actually knew that this battle wouldn't last much longer. This was because what Sheng Mei was proficient in was not just the life and death laws. Cold light flashed in Sheng Mei's eyes. The bone sword in her hand drew a circle in the air before she stabbed it into the deep king wheel. Shwa, with the sword blade as the center, howling cold winds rose up from all around. A layer of frost appeared on Sheng Mei's originally beautiful face, and the blood-red lotus mark between her eyebrows also turned icy blue. She calmly stretched out her right hand. Enchanting six-petal frost flowers appeared, rippling around as they spread over the space of the entire deep king wheel. Hiss, hiss. Sheng Mei's entire body exuded a mystical cold air. She raised her hands in the void, drawing images that were beautiful and delicate. Snowflake patterns appeared in the air, staggering outwards and interlocking, filled with infinite charm. Umbral heaven ice array. Lin Ming sucked in a light breath. In the past, when he first met Sheng Mei in the Azure Road, she had used the skill before. The final trial of the Azure Road's 5th test was to battle against the Undying Inferno and Undying Polar Ice. At the start, when the Undying Inferno appeared, it was Sheng Mei who had nearly faced it alone, and what she relied upon to do this was her ice laws, the extreme cold battle array, and Umbral Heaven ice array that she possessed. Ice and fire opposed each other. This was the basis of Sheng Mei's confidence to face the Undying Inferno alone. However, Sheng Mei had eventually failed. Because she alone shouldered the majority of defending against the Undying Inferno's attacks, she had used up too much strength and had failed to kill it. When the Undying Polar Ice appeared afterwards, Sheng Mei and Lin Ming joined together to finally pass the final trial's 5th test. Now, with over 12,000 years having passed, the Umbral Heaven ice array displayed by Sheng Mei had reached an inconceivable boundary. As the ice array appeared, an incomparably horrifying cold energy covered the entire deep king wheel, coating it in a layer of ice. Recklessly freezing ice energy collided against the burning flames that Ian Fire released. For a time, the cold ice melted, but massive swathes of fire were also swallowed up and extinguished. The entire stage had turned into a world of ice and fire. As the Abyssals watched this intense struggle of domains, their eyes bulged open as they stared. This time, Sheng Mei didn't rely on any clever techniques, but instead used her own strength to frontally resist Ian Fire's strength. In a collision of domains, although it was related to one's laws, It was even more so a competition of absolute strength. Elder Ian Fire's complexion rapidly changed. He never imagined that Sheng Mei's attainments in the ice laws would be so amazing. By this point, whoever's domain would finally be able to cover the entire battlefield would take the upper hand, and likely obtain victory in the end. Ian Fire immediately poured more and more of his strength into his domain. Rumble, rumble, rumble. In a clash of the power of laws, countless ice and fire runes were smashed apart. With Sheng Mei at the center of these runes, they were like giant and gorgeous flower petals that bloomed in layers. However, in the end, Sheng Mei was at a higher level. In a collision of strength, she was no weaker than Ian Fire, and in terms of laws, she occupied the advantage. The void froze, and the abyssal flames were swallowed up. Ian Fire clenched his teeth, beads of sweat already dripping down his forehead. Schwa! With a light sound, a pair of black wings unfurled from behind Sheng Mei. She flew up into the air, and in this moment, as layers of runes covered her, she was like a goddess of the heavens. When Sheng Mei released her wings, her umbral heaven ice array also changed in color. The 6-petal flowers began to change from deep blue into pitch black. Black snow and ice surged over the deep king wheel, mysterious and powerful, carrying with it the swallowing force of the power of death. At this time, whether it was Sheng Mei or Ian Fire, neither struck out against the other. This had now become a confrontation of force fields. Time passed by seconds and minutes. After nearly 2 hours more, and more sweat appeared on Ian Fire's face as he used up half his strength. But as for Sheng Mei, her breathing only quickened a little. From the start until now, she had maintained utter calm. With the fight have reached this degree, there was no longer any point in continuing. Sheng Mei had already proven her strength. In terms of the ice laws, she completely surpassed Ian Fire's abyssal flames. I admit defeat. Ian Fire struggled to say, crestfallen. He thought that he might lose, but he never imagined it would be, because he was directly defeated in the domain he excelled in, and particularly in the abyssal flame force field he was so proud of. Whoosh! Immediately, the flames that shrouded the skies completely scattered, and the layers of ice also shattered, turning into countless motes of light that shot into the heavens before turning into a thick cloud of snow that gently fell downwards. Such a scene was as beautiful as a dream. And at this moment, the Sheng Mei that was within this beautiful scene left many abyssals stunned. Sheng Mei had won her 3rd battle. If it was just winning, then no one would have been surprised. But during this battle, she had displayed completely new skills and never used the abilities she did during her first battle. The feeling this gave off was as if Sheng Mei's strength was unfathomably deep. The holy demoness has always been proud and arrogant, and she seems particularly sensitive to people who dare to propose marriage to her. It seems that even though their battle will be utterly lopsided, that fellow will still be brutally beaten up by the holy demoness. He might even die. If he dies, then he dies. When the holy demoness laid down the rules in the past, she said that anyone who proposed marriage would have to sign the life and death contract. With the holy demoness' current strength and status, the ancient Ian sect wouldn't do anything if she killed a mere Empyrean-level elder. The present Lin Ming had already become a clown in the hearts of many abyssals. Because Sheng Mei had won 3 continuous matches against true divinity-level elders, Lin Ming's match against Sheng Mei was now nothing more than a farce. The truth was that at this time, the several elders from the ancient Ian sects felt their cheeks burning. In particular, when Sheng Mei looked their way, they all wished that they could find some hole in the ground that they could worm their way into. 2 of their true divinity elders had been defeated by Sheng Mei. And there was also Lin Ming. After a few more days, he would fight with Sheng Mei. She could already annihilate true divinities, so who cared about an Empyrean? Ian Moon, everything is up to you. You must win, the great elder said to a tall and burly abyssal near him. Ian Moon was last remaining hope of the ancient Ian sect. If you also lose, then our ancient Ian sect will have not even a single victory. If so, then not only will we lose all face, but once we enter the demon god's tomb, we will be placed in a completely passive position. Within the dark abyss, the laws of the jungle were applied where the strong ate the weak. The strong became stronger, and the weaker became weaker. With 6 totem-level influences, the reason that 2 of them were able to break out of the pack and stand out was all because they were strong enough that they could continuously occupy more resources. Like this, they could become increasingly terrifying. I understand. Ian Moon grit his teeth. As the final hope of the ancient Ian sect, he felt a great pressure on his shoulders. However, the one next wasn't him, but an elder from 9 Nether Palace. This abyssal elder had also chosen to challenge Sheng Mei. His strength was inferior to Nether Nihilities and even ordinary when compared to Ian Fire. There was naturally no suspense into the result. Sheng Mei won. This was also Sheng Mei's last match. Like this, Sheng Mei won all 4 of her matches, 3 which had faced her, and 1 which had admitted defeat. Such success was too dreadful. Someone at the limit of an Empyrean has won 4 straight matches against true divinity-level abyssals. This is simply unprecedented in the past and unrivaled in the future. An abyssal elder from a small influence sighed deeply. Now, within the entire dark abyss, there wouldn't be anyone who doubted how bright Sheng Mei's future was. In time, she would eventually become the top powerhouse of the entire abyss. And at this time, the final match was ready to commence. Ian Moon stepped on stage. This would also be the last match of the competition. The abyssals from the ancient Ian sect felt their hearts tighten. They paid close attention to Ian Moon. This was a battle they absolutely could not lose. Ian Moon's opponent was an abyssal demon from Deep King Road that seemed relatively weaker. Of course, this was only relatively speaking. Of all the elders who originated from Deep King Road and were able to represent Deep King Road to enter the demon god's tomb, none were weak. Ian Moon put forth his full effort in this battle. He didn't immediately reveal his trump cards when he stepped, nor did he use any moves that underestimated his opponent. The battle proceeded in an orderly manner, which probing strikes, gradually growing stronger, move countering moves, feints, and surges. In addition to some plans, Ian Moon tried everything he could to defeat his opponent. However, the Deep King Road elder wasn't some weakling. Facing Ian Moon's steady onslaught, this elder also followed step by step. The 2 abyssal elders were cautious in their moves. There didn't seem to be much difference in their strengths. And in such a situation, the battle between the 2 abyssals continued for a long time. They fought for an entire day, consuming a great deal of their energy. Even so, when the fight reached a deadlock, a change suddenly occurred. When the Deep King Road elder clashed with Ian Moon, once more, just as he finished attacking, a black fluctuation of energy shot out from between his eyebrows. This black flow of energy seemed to be the soul of some fierce demon. The demon's soul flew into Ian Moon's spiritual sea. As this demon's soul struck his spiritual sea, Ian Moon let out a cry of grief. As if he were possessed, he began to violently shiver. The Deep King Road elder took advantage of this split second to flash in front of Ian Moon and smash his claw down on Ian Moon's chest. Puff! Ian Moon cried out miserably as he was sent tumbling away. The 2 abyssals had used up around the same amount of energy. Now, this heavy strike was enough to decide victory and defeat. As a result, the Deep King Road elder won. After this occurred, the abyssals in the audience fell silent for several breaths of time. Then they began to seethe with excitement. That Deep King Road elder had clearly been raising something in his mind, something similar to an ancient evil soul. This ancient evil soul wasn't too powerful, And if Ian Moon was in his peak state, then it wouldn't have been able to harm him at all. But because Ian Moon had consumed most of his strength, this ancient evil soul was able to rush in and become the last straw that crushed Ian Moon's back. And the Deep King Road elder was able to take advantage of this brief paralysis to defeat Ian Moon. This was likely already planned from the beginning. Ian Moon's choice to take the fight in a steady and orderly manner was likely gladly accepted by his opponent. With this, the ancient Ian sect lost all 3 matches. For a time, the abyssals of Deep King Road raucously cheered. Some abyssals from smaller influences had gloating expressions on their faces. As for the several elders of the ancient Ian sect, their complexions were beyond ugly. It had to be known that 9 Nether Palace had won 1 match, whilst their ancient Ian sect had suffered total defeat. They had not only lost all benefits, but also their face. This was no different from giving the enemy army all one's soldiers and wives. Ha ha ha! Elder Ian God, well fought. On the side of Deep King Road, the middle true divinity elder presiding over the competition chuckled. Our skills are inferior to others, so we are sincerely convinced of our losses. Ian God barely managed to maintain some semblance of composure and uttered a few polite words. And behind Ian God, the other disciples of the ancient Ian sect fidgeted around, obviously wishing to leave as soon as possible. These disciples could clearly hear the discussions of the abyssals all around them. When a wall was about to collapse, everyone wanted to give it a push. All these small influences fervently wished to see a spot amongst the 6 totem-level influences open up. After all, Ian had long since died, and the Book of Ian had disappeared without a trace. It was time for the ancient Ian sect to let go of their position. Let's go! Ian God waved his hand, turning to depart. There was no meaning to staying any longer. The longer they stayed, the more they would suffer the ridicule of others. The ancient Ian sect disciples all felt relieved. They hurried to stand, wishing they could teleport out of this place, as they didn't want to stay a single moment longer. However, as the many disciples of the ancient Ian sect stood up, a cold and enchanting voice rang through the entire audience. Just where are you going? The battle has yet to end. The abyssals present were stunned. They turned to see that the woman speaking was a woman wrapped in fog-like darkness. She was Deep King Road's holy demoness. Chapter 21:21, Facing Shengmei. Chapter 21:21, Facing Shengmei. Elder Ian God paused. He glanced toward Shengmei, a restless premonition in his heart. Shengmei faintly said, Your ancient Ian sect still has an elder that wishes to challenge. Then, we might as well begin today. As Shengmei spoke, her gaze fell on Lin Ming. For a time, Lin Ming became the focus of attention for every abyssal present. All of them turned towards him. Many of these abyssals recognized Lin Ming and knew that this was the fellow who had a mere Empyrean cultivation and wished to jump ranks to challenge Deep King Road's holy demoness. Then, the abyssals present had entertained expressions as they looked at the complexions of the abyssals from the ancient Ian sect. For such shame to fall upon others, this naturally caused these abyssals to be happy. Deep King Road's holy demoness truly doesn't care for the feelings of others. This battle is clearly bullying, and yet she isn't willing to let it go. True, but this punishment is to serve as a warning for others. In truth, with just the strength that the holy demoness displayed today, there should be no one willing to mention marriage to her in the future. An elder from a small influence said with a gloating tone. At this time, the complexions of the several elders from the ancient Ian sect were incredibly ugly. They all wished they could dig a hole into the ground and hide away. By this point, this battle was no longer humorous to them. Even Ian God already started to regret designing this trap for Lin Ming. Now, not only would Lin Ming be ruined, but their ancient Ian sect would be disgraced. and mocked by others. Elder Ian God managed to force out a smile. With his right hand he touched his chest, his long black nails joining together in a common bow of etiquette amongst the abyssals. He said, "Your Highness Holy Demoness indeed loves to joke. Victory and defeat is already clear to all. At the limits of an Empyrean, Your Highness Holy Demoness is already able to defeat a lower true divinity abyssal. This sort of accomplishment is more than enough to be called the number one elite of the entire Dark Abyss. So what reason is there to do something so unbefitting your status as fighting a young elder from my ancient Ian sect? Moreover, our elder also lacks in cultivation and was only dragged here to make up for numbers. If there was any way that we offended Your Highness Holy Demoness before this, then I personally apologize." Ian God politely said to Sheng Mei. From between his words, he was clearly implying that if Sheng Mei were to truly fight Lin Ming, then she would simply be disregarding her status to bully someone far weaker. Ian God thought that with Sheng Mei's arrogance and pride, she would surely make a show and not blame anyone in this matter. Moreover, he had even apologized and admitted defeat. However, he never thought that Sheng Mei would seem as if she never heard his words at all. She continued to look at Lin Ming, and what left Ian God and the other elders of the ancient Ian sect the most speechless was that Lin Ming was still sitting in meditation where he was, as if everything occurring around him was irrelevant. This caused the ancient Ian sect elders to nearly stumble to the ground. Just what was he still doing here? Ian God sent an impatient sound transmission to Lin Ming. "Brat, have you gone mad? Have you seen the strength of these Deep King Road abyssals? Just give up any thoughts of entering the demon god's tomb with the Book of Ian." He originally placed a trap for Lin Ming because he wanted Lin Ming to suffer a little bit of hardship. And now, all the abyssals present had witnessed Sheng Mei's strength on their own. As long as Lin Ming wasn't stupid, then he would know that taking the Book of Ian to enter the demon god's tomb was no different than walking into his own death. If Lin Ming were to regret his choice and draw back, although it might be a bit ugly to look at, it was still far better than being beaten senseless by Sheng Mei. At least the Book of Ian would be safe after this lesson. However, Lin Ming simply ignored Ian God's sound transmission. He slowly rose up, his feet planted down and his toes pushed forwards as he faced Sheng Mei. Sheng Mei's lips curved up, her expression seeming to say, "I knew you would accept the challenge. Are you really planning to fight?" Ian Light could see that demon power already surged through Lin Ming's body, and he stared at Lin Ming as if he were looking at a monster. This Lin Ming still wanted to fight Sheng Mei in such a situation? Had he gone insane? Or was he just far too stupid? Lin Ming opened his mouth and said, "Your Highness Holy Demoness, I should refer to you like this, I suppose. Are you one of the people entering the demon god's tomb on behalf of Deep King Road?" Sheng Mei was startled. She didn't know why this abyssal elder who wished to challenge her would ask such a question. "Why do you ask?" Sheng Mei didn't directly respond, but Lin Ming continued to say, "If I'm not wrong, then that should be true. In the abyss, strength is revered above all, and this true divinity-level competition was arranged to assign resources based on strength. If Your Highness Holy Demoness was to obtain one of the core spots of those entering the demon god's tomb, then that would be a position truly worthy or your reputation and outstanding talent." As Lin Ming spoke, all of the surrounding abyssals, including Sheng Mei, were bewildered. Ian God glared at Lin Ming and sent him a sound transmission. "What nonsense are you speaking? Hurry up and draw back. Or are you really so stubborn about dying?" Lin Ming disregarded Ian God. He continued to say, according to the rules of this true divinity competition, the division of resources is based upon the respective levels of strength of those that will enter the demon god's tomb. Then, does that mean if I possess strength similar to that of Your Highness Holy Demoness, I will also enjoy equivalent treatment. Lin Ming spoke so much before finally saying his goal. Since his battle with Shang Mei was destined to occur, then he might as well win a chance for himself and bring the Book of Ian into the demon god's tomb openly and proudly. His words, whether it was from logic or truth, all were impeccable. These were indeed the rules for which the alliance was based upon, in which strength would determine everything. It was fair and just. However, with Lin Ming's current status and the present situation, for him to say such words before he stepped onto the battlefield seemed as if he had gone mad. As a result, the many abyssals watching were all left wide-eyed. What did he just say? If he possesses strength similar to the holy demoness, then he can also enjoy equivalent treatment. Because Lin Ming's words were too outrageous, many abyssals weren't able to react for some time. For some reason, it seemed as if this ninth elder from the ancient Ian sect hadn't yet realized that he was no opponent of Shang Mei's from the start. Not only was he still dreaming of holding this beauty in his arms, but he also wanted to enjoy similar treatment upon entering the demon god's tomb. Was his mind normal? This arrogant and ignorant fellow, just how could he stand there and still challenge the holy demoness? At this time, the abyssals of Deep King Road felt the entire situation worth a good laugh. I never thought that this elder from the ancient Ian sect would have such a unique personality. A Deep King Road elder said. As an ancient Ian sect elder heard this, his face turned green. Now, all of these ancient Ian sect elders wished they could jump on stage to beat up Lin Ming to prevent him humiliating them any further. Even Shang Mei was startled. She realized that there was something special about Lin Ming, but this was something that purely came from some inexplicable touch of intuition. Still, she never believed that Lin Ming had the qualifications to fight her. Now, with Lin Ming saying such words, they had left her surprised. But surprise was only surprise. She still answered Lin Ming's question. If you can truly defeat me, then according to our previous agreement, you can hold the grand dual cultivation ceremony with me. From this alone, you will be considered half a disciple of Deep King Road, and in addition with the contract of this alliance, you will be able to enjoy the same treatment as me. But do you think you can defeat me? As Shang Mei finished speaking, her eyes began to glow with a chilling light. Although she thought Lin Ming was special, this didn't mean she desired to dual cultivate with him. In fact, when it came to dual cultivation or marriage, no matter which abyssal had proposed it, Shang Mei would crush them without hesitation. I understand then. The words that your Highness Holy Demoness speak should be considered a promise. Lin Ming was afraid that Shang Mei couldn't take responsibility for such words. His gaze turned towards the Deep King Road elder standing not too far from Shang Mei. At this time, the Deep King Road elder was already at a loss for words. He simply looked at Lin Ming like he was looking at a babbling fool. Just where had this crazy fellow jumped out from? Because all of the Deep King Road elders were stunned. No one replied to Lin Ming. He frowned, asking once more, do they or don't they? These words caused many abyssals to roar out laughing. This was really far too hilarious. As for the elders of the ancient Ian sect, they all wanted to fall to their knees and beg Lin Ming to step down. Why was he insisting on keeping up such a charade at this time? Would it hurt him to say a few less words? Yes, the words of the holy demoness can be considered as correct. Deep King Road's elder Deep Epic nodded, beaming with delight. As long as you win, then during this venture into the demon god's tomb, the disciples there will take you as a core figure. Understood. After obtaining the approval of Deep King Road's many elders in public, Lin Ming wasn't afraid that he couldn't bring the Book of Ian in anymore. In the next moment, his figure flashed like gods and ghosts as he appeared on the Deep King wheel, directly facing Shang Mei. Chapter 21-22, Battle of Proud Elites. Chapter 21-22 Battle of Proud Elites. Gi. Sheng Mei came fluttering down onto the ash-gray Deep King Will like a black butterfly, landing 100 feet away from Lin Ming and gazing at him. A single parting had lasted 12,000 years. After meeting her so suddenly, even Lin Ming didn't understand how he felt towards this woman who had deeply affected his life. At this moment, it would be wrong to say that there were no waves of emotion in his heart, but it was just that these waves of emotions were hidden deep within, so that on the surface all that showed was a calmness as still as a placid lake, and eyes that were as sharp as swords. Opposite Lin Ming, Sheng Mei was also quiet. She slowly released her aura so that it covered the entire Deep King wheel. And compared to the battlefield platform with its thick and roiling killing intent, the situation beneath the stage was actually filled with raucous noise and the sound of laughter. For the Abyssals watching, this was a fight that no one could take seriously at all. In this sort of environment, the elders of the ancient Ian sect felt their livers hurt, their stomachs hurt, and their entire bodies ill. At this time, a pair of pitch-black wings unfurled from behind Sheng Mei, opening like the tail of a black peacock, and then wrapping around her flawless figure. Sheng Mei's eyes gazed upon Lin Ming, a burst of brilliance flashing from her eyes. As Sheng Mei displayed her wings, this caused the atmosphere in the audience to calm down a little. Originally, everyone thought that this battle would last but a moment, and at most Sheng Mei would make a single move. However, what happened left them startled. Sheng Mei released her dark angel wings, which proved that she would at least use her dark angel bloodline to deal with a mere upper Empyrean abyssal. Was this really necessary? And at this time Lin Ming also drew out his own weapon, a black bone spear. In fact, this bone spear was the black dragon spear, but at this moment the black dragon spear was covered in a layer of thick bone. This was demon bone that was divided from Lin Ming's demon avatar. Not only did it completely wrap around the black dragon spear, but it caused the spear to be a great deal thicker, longer, and heavier, giving it an incredibly ferocious and hideous appearance at the same time, as if it were a spine pulled out from some giant. With this giant spear combined with Lin Ming's towering abyssal figure, it seemed just right. Sheng Mei didn't recognize the concealed black dragon spear, but as she saw Lin Ming's spear stance, a strange feeling stirred in her heart. At this moment, Lin Ming moved. His entire being was like a divine spear hidden in a wooden chest for countless years, covered in dust. As he left the chest, divine light bloomed, shooting through the entire audience. This was clearly only light produced by energy, but this light passed through the protective force field of the Deep King Wheel and cast down a massive pressure on the Abyssals present. This is... what? The noisy audience suddenly quieted down. Without enough time for the Abyssals watching to think, Lin Ming had already rushed in front of Sheng Mei. The spear in his hand came crashing down, and the thick bone-like shaft bent like a real spine as it whipped towards Sheng Mei's waist. Because of this spear, a part of the Deep King Wheel Force field, supported by 12 totem poles, was forcefully twisted. Everything happened in a spark of time. Sheng Mei's pupils contracted. She thought that Lin Ming's strength might not be ordinary, but she didn't expect his first move to be so formidable. This spear strike was simple and without any elegance at all, but as it barbarically twisted the Deep King Wheel Force field, it reminded her that this spear strike was in no way inferior to the strike of a lower true divinity-level abyssal. This mysterious abyssal had a lower cultivation than she did, and yet he was able to send out such an attack. Whoosh! Black sword light flashed. Sheng Mei slashed her bone sword down upon the bone spear. But because of the massive weight of the bone spear and the incredible disparity in size between the two weapons, Sheng Mei was sent flying away. Her figure was like a black bird that was sent floundering in the air. Her feet rapidly moved as she stepped on the edge of the Deep King Wheel force field to release the terrifying momentum behind Lin Ming's strike. Beneath the tremendous impulsion, every step she took on the light barrier caused ripples to spread out. And at this time, Lin Ming chased ahead, with his far larger figure. The scene of him rushing toward Sheng Mei was like a hawk chasing a rabbit. Bang! Lin Ming's spear ruthlessly pounded downwards. Sheng Mei avoided the strike, and the spear crashed into the light barrier. The Deep King force field violently shivered beneath Lin Ming's horrifyingly great strength. Bang! 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 Lin Ming brought his spear pounding down again and again. Every strike was incredibly quick, but Sheng Mei was like a willow leaf fluttering in the wind, barely managing to avoid every dangerous strike. All of these terrifying attacks were withstood by the Deep King force field. This Deep King force field was strong, but beneath the continuous barrage of attacks, even though each attack was only at a single point, it still trembled more and more as if it would tear apart at any moment. Seeing the light barrier around the Deep King will tremble like a soap bubble in the wind, ready to pop at any moment. The abyssals watching were all left staring with wide eyes. At this time, their expressions were filled with utter shock, bewilderment, and disbelief. Their faces were twisted into things that seemed like complex array diagrams. Was this the strength of an Empyrean level abyssal? No matter who was asked, that Empyrean abyssal, the ninth elder of the ancient Aeon sect, was considered an idiot by all, yet he possessed such brute force. They thought it brute force because many abyssals didn't want to acknowledge Lin Ming's true strength. Thus, they subconsciously explained the reason for why the Deep King force field was shaking his being, because of Lin Ming's brute force. After all, they had all laughed at Lin Ming and called him an idiot, but if he wasn't the idiot, then it was obvious who the true idiot was instead. No one wanted to admit that they were an idiot. Thus, even with reality placed before them, none of them wanted to acknowledge Lin Ming's strength. But soon after they could no longer find a reason to console themselves, crash! Howling winds rose up from all over. Sheng Mei's wings flapped, and her speed rapidly increased. Her figure turned into a blurry shadow, so fast that most abyssals present weren't able to follow her movements. Sheng Mei was fast, and her comprehension of the laws was high. This was recognized by all. Her only deficiency lay in her physical strength. However, none of the abyssals present thought that even in this situation, the ancient Aeon sect's ninth elder would be able to keep up with Sheng Mei in speed. His figure also vanished into countless afterimages. Like rising black mist, everyone was covered in layers of darkness. In terms of speed, the two of them were matched. This basically surpassed the standards of the overwhelming majority of lower true divinities. Not only did Lin Ming possess horrifying physical strength, but also terrifying speed. From these two aspects alone, that was more than enough to contend with a lower true divinity abyssal. In the layers of light, brilliance dazzled outwards. Lin Ming and Sheng Mei were like two meteors arching through the heavens, chasing after each other. This scene was gorgeous to the extreme. All of the abyssals watching were left speechless. This ancient Aeon sect's ninth elder was no different from a monster, someone even more abnormal than Sheng Mei. Sheng Mei was at the limits of an Empyrean, but this monster was only around an upper Empyrean. The playful and taunting expressions that covered the faces of the elders of Deep King Road had stiffened a long time ago. As for the other small influences, the abyssals that had been expecting a good play were all left staring blank-eyed, as if they had seen ghosts. And the ones most shocked were the elders of the ancient Aeon sect. Just now they had all been restless and uncomfortable no matter how they stood or sat, and the gaze of the countless abyssals around them felt like countless ants crawling over their bodies, causing them to wish to crawl into the ground. But in the blink of an eye, all of them were frozen like statues. their eyes staring straight onto the afterimages atop the Deep King wheel. Was that monster really from their ancient Aeon sect? Was that really their ancient Aeon sect's ninth elder? All of the ancient Aeon sect abyssals were filled with disbelief. Before coming to Deep King Road, they had all been in contact with Lin Ming for a long time. But never once had they imagined that Lin Ming would be so abnormal, that he would be an upper Empyrean capable of fighting a true divinity. This sort of talent perhaps couldn't even be found in ancient times 10 billion years ago, but an elder they had randomly picked up from nowhere had actually possessed such terrifying talent. The curtain of light trembled more and more, each attack causing it to resonate. Not only were there Lin Ming's attacks, but also Sheng Mei's. Bang! A loud explosion rang out. Lin Ming and Sheng Mei collided in the void. The entire curtain of light blew apart before slowly drawing back. Although the curtain of light didn't shatter, the horrifying spear light and sword light that rushed out caused all abyssals below the true divinity realm to be covered in a cold sweat. That sort of feeling was like someone pointing a weapon between their eyebrows. It was too terrifying. Chapter 21-23, Demon Azura. Chapter 21-23, Demon Azura. On the Deep King wheel, Lin Ming and Sheng Mei stood 200 feet apart from each other. The two of them motionlessly stared at each other. Only the demon power that burned like blazing flames and icy fires upon their weapons reminded everyone just how intense the battle just now had been. What are you? Sheng Mei's frosty voice reverberated through the audience. She was well aware that it was impossible for a higher abyssal like Lin Ming to appear out of nowhere. However, no matter whether it was this person's abyssal bloodline, aura, techniques, or whatever else, she still couldn't find any clues about him. This abyssal gave off a strange feeling. He only calmly stood there, but he was like a deep pool lying still in a mountain, an eternal proud son of heaven looking down upon the world with disdain, carrying with him an inexplicable and unknown invincible spirit. Lin Ming remained silent. He only raised the black dragon spear, the barrel shaft crackling with bone. At this moment, the black dragon spear in his hands seemed to become a snake made of black bone, containing an incomparably powerful strength, as well as a cunning attack trajectory. Lin Ming felt more and more desire for this battle. This enigmatic Sheng Mei was no different from a riddle, and she had entangled herself in his life in countless ways. And she, for the last 10 billion years, was one of the proudest elites, whether it was in the dark abyss or the 33 heavens. She was someone that could step on that supreme road to become a horrifying character like the immortal sovereign. This was a match that was fated to be, and it would begin today. Lin Ming took a deep breath, his dark amber-brown pupils slowly contracting. The power of demons formed a black snake around him that wildly weaved about. At this time, Lin Ming's true self was sitting in his demon avatar's inner world. Above his truer self, 9 brilliant stars manifested. This was the 9 stars of the Tao Palace. Facing Sheng Mei, Lin Ming couldn't switch out to his true body to fight, nor could he openly use the laws that were well known by Sheng Mei. Otherwise, just relying on the intuitive sense of familiarity that Sheng Mei felt towards Lin Ming, as well the laws that were unique to Lin Ming, how could she not guess his identity? As the 9 stars of the Tao Palace appeared, the strength of Lin Ming's true self rapidly rose. All of this strength was constantly fused into his demon avatar to bolster it. Whoosh! Lin Ming's figure vanished in the void. With overwhelming potential, he rushed toward Sheng Mei. His demon body fused with his bone spear, forming a heaven-shattering and earth-sundering divine light. After Lin Ming's demon avatar was fused with the 9 stars of the Tao Palace, the intensity of his mortal body could compare with a true divinity's spirit treasure. He thrust out his spear toward Sheng Mei, a billowing momentum following it that seemed as if it could pierce through the endless universe. The abyssal laws interwove with the strength of the 9 stars of the Tao Palace, spinning together like a river of stars and forming giant black stars that swirled atop the spear shaft. This spear possessed an overwhelming potential and suffocating oppressive force. The surrounding abyssal disciples couldn't help but tremble. They felt that this spear light contained a strength that could devour them whole, and they started to retreat in panic. Even the complexions of many true divinity abyssal elders changed. Facing such a powerful strike, Sheng Mei's eyes burst out with brilliance once more. The dark wings on her back glowed with an icy metallic luster as demon runes bloomed on each one, light stars that floated atop them. Go! Dark wings soared upwards, rapidly folding in to directly welcome Lin Ming's earth-striking blow. Arrogant and filled with incomparable confidence, facing Lin Ming's powerful attack, Sheng Mei only relied on her invincible dark angel wings to meet him. Bang! Dark wings collided with the blinding divine brilliance of Lin Ming's spear light. Like 2 stars crashing together, billions of abyssal runes were annihilated as threads of abyssal laws shattered. This massive impact force caused the deep king force field to violently rock yet again, as if it would tear apart. As the totem poles that supported the force field had to withstand the pressure, 10,000 demonic spirits seemed to suddenly howl. Demon energy soared to the heavens as shadows rose up, as if a peerless ancient abyssal were reaching through the endless river of time to protect the force field. War drums sounded like thunderbolts humming in the air. An even more formidable demonic force field strength raged out to stabilize the Deep King force field. However, Lin Ming's attack hadn't yet ended. With a loud shout, Lin Ming activated the power of the Azura blood in his demon avatar's inner world. Thick scales covered his body, and behind his true self, the phantom of an Azura war god emerged. Within this war god phantom's hands, 3 wheels slowly revolved like grinding pans. This was power of the Azura Sutra. Pung, pung, pung. 3 wheels shattered, turning into countless runes that fused into Lin Ming's demon avatar's body. All of this occurred within the demon avatar's body, so the many abyssals watching didn't know. At this moment, all these abyssals saw the muscles of Lin Ming's demon avatar crazily wriggle about. His joints released explosive crackling sounds, and his towering body began to rise once more. The bones and scales on Lin Ming's body became harder and increasingly fierce. A pair of curved horns jutted out from his head. Lin Ming's demon avatar had turned into a ferocious Azura demon. The changes that appeared on his true self were minor, but after manifesting on his demon avatar's body, they became exaggeratedly terrifying. Underneath the pressure of so much strength, many abyssals felt their eyes pop wide open. Higher abyssal body metamorphosis. The abyssal demons were similar to the saints in that certain clans amongst them could undergo body metamorphosis. After metamorphosizing, they would experience a rapid rise in all aspects of strength. The truth was that body metamorphosis wasn't strange, in particular higher abyssals with outstanding levels of talent. This shouldn't have been enough to stir up any interest, but the crux of the issue here was that Lin Ming had already shown far too abnormal a performance just now. An upper Empyrean was able to fight a true divinity-level opponent to equally match with Sheng Mei. And yet, Lin Ming even used body metamorphosis atop all of that. Heavens, this fellow is simply a monster. An abyssal elder from a small influence said, his voice shaking. The current Lin Ming could no longer be described as being able to defeat a lower true divinity. He might have the strength to fight against a peak lower true divinity. Could he really be able to defeat the holy demoness? The ancient Aeon sex elder Aeon god whispered, his wizen face frozen in place. If one defeated Deep King Road's holy demoness, then they would be able to obtain this number 1 elite of the Dark Abyss. someone that might even control the abyss in the future. Lin Ming, Sheng Mei, both were proud children of heaven, and if they were to dual cultivate, then their cultivation speed would rise to a new level. That time would arrive before long, perhaps even as soon as 100,000 years. At that time, just what heights would they be at? Moreover, if they could pass the abyssal ritual of the demon god's tomb, just what would happen then? Elder Ian God found this hard to imagine. In fact, not only did the abyssals watching the battle atop the platform react with shock, but even Sheng Mei herself paled. Again, Lin Ming bellowed. He pulled up the black dragon spear, grasping it in both hands and thrusting forwards again. And what this spear stabbed at was Sheng Mei's pair of dark angel wings. This scene caused Sheng Mei's abyssal fans to cry out in alarm. The wings of a dark angel were indeed powerful, but no matter how powerful they still had their limits. In other words, Sheng Mei may not be able to use her wings to block the strike, and if the attack was too great, then her wings might even break. In this critical moment, Sheng Mei's eyes sparkled with a cold light. She slapped her hands against the void, and countless crystalline ice flowers appeared. In that moment, she had formed millions of law seals. Each law seal contained the source strength of extreme ice. A freezing atmosphere swept over the world, forming a wall of ice that was thousands of feet high. Deep Ice Domain. After undergoing 9 revolutions of reincarnation, Sheng Mei's mortal body had reached perfection, and her strength was tens of thousands of times greater than before. She had comprehended the ice laws to the limit, and now she could even freeze and smash apart the great Tao itself. But as Lin Ming's all-shattering spear crashed into the wall, he barraged it with an onslaught of attacks, crushing it apart as if he were breaking down a planet. The bone spear shot out again, and again without end. Compared to Sheng Mei, Lin Ming's body was like that of an eagle pouncing on a sparrow. As the ice wall was about to break, Lin Ming grabbed the black dragon spear and thrust forwards one last time. Kacha! With a loud explosive sound, the ice wall shattered into countless pieces, causing the many abyssals watching to hold their breath. Lin Ming's spear collided against Sheng Mei's black wings. Chi! A grating sound filled the air. Beneath the impact, the bone spear bent like a bow. Sheng Mei used her left arm to prop up her wings, and with her right hand grasped her sword to resist Lin Ming's attack. At this moment, her dark angel wings were now covered in faint rivulets of blood. Chapter 21-24, Life-Reaping Sword Strike. Chapter 21-24, Life-Reaping Sword Strike. Heart-shocking blood flowed down from Sheng Mei's black wings, dyeing them with traces of red. Lin Ming's powerful and fierce demon avatar, Sheng Mei's delicate and beautiful figure. The two of them formed a blinding visual contrast. The spear seemed as if it would pierce through Sheng Mei's wings and stab into her body. The many abyssal elders watching this battle were all left dripping with a cold sweat. The black dragon spear had bent into a crescent moon, and Sheng Mei was also forced back to the edge of the light barrier. However, the scene was frozen in this moment. After Lin Ming's strike was weakened by the Deep Ice Domain, less than half of its original strength was left remaining. Finally, it was successfully blocked by Sheng Mei's wings. Its momentum had been ended. Without the impact of energy, it was naturally impossible for the spear to pierce through Sheng Mei's dark angel wings. Lin Ming slightly frowned. In the end, because his true self couldn't appear, then regardless of whether it was the 9 stars of the Tao Palace he used or the Azura blood, if he couldn't display it outwardly and had to funnel the energy through his demon avatar, then there would inevitably be losses. At this moment, a warning signal flared in Lin Ming's mind. He rapidly stepped back in space, hurriedly retreating. Wang, borrowing the strength of the black dragon spear unbending from its curved form, Lin Ming shot back like an arrow, his speed rapidly reaching the extreme. But during this time, Sheng Mei's bone sword appeared in front of Lin Ming without warning. The bone sword light was even faster than Lin Ming's retreat. Above the sword blade, energy and laws wildly surged. Tens of thousands of rays of light wove together and formed blood-red lotus flowers that seemed to swallow all light. An ordinary and simple sword strike carried with it an unfathomable vastness, a strange power that seemed as if it could pierce through space and crush time. Lin Ming's flesh and skin seemed as if it were already pierced through by this bone sword, making his heart race. And no matter how quickly he drew backwards, the bone sword followed right after like a homing bird. If he slowed, even just a bit, then the bone sword would pierce right through his head, like a sword of judgment that presided over life and death. This came from the life and death laws that Sheng Mei cultivated. A single sword strike, it would not return without severing the soul and life. With a distance of only an inch apart, Lin Ming could feel his protective demon essence pierce through, and his forehead already dripping with blood. As this minor wound appeared, Lin Ming could feel his life force slowly fade away, drawn out by the strange bone sword. With the presence of the death laws, all things in existence would wither away. All life would be annihilated. The life force in Lin Ming's body was similarly being swallowed by Sheng Mei's death laws. Her Highness the Holy Demoness has used her laws. Many abyssals from Deep King Road began to stir up. Relatively speaking, Sheng Mei's physical strength and abyssal body were weaker. Her speed lay somewhere in the center, and what she excelled in the most were the laws. And for the vast majority of abyssals, their weakest aspects tended to be the laws. In particular for a towering and powerfully built abyssal like Lin Ming. With such a potent bloodline and mighty physical body, it was likely that he had to pay for this with a smaller spiritual C, making it so that perceiving the laws would cost double the effort with half the results. Perhaps from here on out the tides of battle would turn. Many Deep King Road elders were looking forwards to what would happen. In fact, over 95% of the abyssals present hoped that Sheng Mei could win. Sheng Mei had countless legions of fans, and they were already accustomed to her awesome talent. As for Lin Ming, the abyssals present only felt envy towards him. Only the ancient Ian sect faintly hoped that Lin Ming would be able to win. If so, then they could draw closer their relationship with Deep King Road and obtain even more advantages from the demon god's tomb. One running, one chasing. The Deep King wasn't large, and because of the confinement of the force field, the space within was small and narrow. However, to Lin Ming and Sheng Mei, this wasn't a problem at all, because during the rapid pursuit, both of them constantly used the space laws, and thus for them space had already lost all meaning. But no matter how swift or deft Lin Ming was in shuttling through space, Sheng Mei's sword remained locked onto the point between his eyebrows. Holy Scripture laws. A bright light sparked in Lin Ming's eyes. Sheng Mei's sword was completely reflected in his deep brown eyes, just like an image in a clear mirror. With a thought, a bloody demonic eye drilled out from between Lin Ming's eyebrows, like a rock gushing out of lava. The gaze of this demonic eye carried with it a strange demonic charm, as if it could see through all lies and illusions. Then the gaze of this demonic eye fell upon the bone sword. This demon eye was the fused form of Lin Ming's Davik, Dao Palace, and 3 live pupils. However, after joining together his true self with his avatar and using the power of demons to transform it, this eye had gained this appearance. Lin Ming already had some understandings into the Holy Scripture laws. Now, beneath the gaze of the demon eye, he was able to see everything clearly. The myriad laws atop the bone sword were all perfectly balanced in his vision. Sheng Mei's attainments in the Holy Scripture laws far surpassed Lin Ming's, but that didn't mean Lin Ming couldn't catch up to her. At this moment, the technique that Sheng Mei used was completely recorded by Lin Ming's Davik, I Dao Palace, and 3 Lives pupils. It branded itself deep into his memory, through his eyes, and into his mind. Lin Ming closed his eyes, and when he opened them once more, they radiated a blinding divine light that could pierce through all puzzles. By relying on his own understandings as well as the Davik I Dao Palace, he could find the most vulnerable point in Sheng Mei's attack. Whoosh! The black dragon spear pierced out once more. The pitch-black spear swelled with roiling flames. Like a roaring bone dragon, it hurtled towards that singular point. The black dragon spear was a divine weapon refined by the Azura Road Master. Although it wasn't the weapon used by the Azura Road Master's true self, it was still incomparably powerful. This spear drew in the surrounding demon force field, causing thousands of black suns to erupt on the spear point and causing black light to flood through the audience. Zhang, the black dragon spear, collided with Sheng Mei's bone sword. Sheng Mei's sword that had recorded the ability to chase after life and death suddenly started to slow down. The law runes that lingered upon the blade began to burst apart, instantly shattering into thousands of pieces. Peng, runes danced in the air, dissipating like night stars fading in the morning skies. Sheng Mei's complexion changed. How was this possible? She never thought that in this situation, Lin Ming would be able to counterattack and see through her move. She had used the highest laws, so how had he managed to break through them? Was it just a coincidence? Before Sheng Mei could think about what had occurred, Lin Ming's second spear strike came towards her. Sheng. Another collision occurred. This time, Lin Ming didn't choose Sheng Mei's weakest point, but one that was only relatively weak. This was because Sheng Mei's sword potential had already been broken in half in his first spear strike. As for the remaining amount, Lin Ming could calmly deal with it. He didn't need every spear strike to hit her weakest point, because doing so would definitely arouse her suspicions. After all, the Holy Scripture laws weren't easy to see through. Now, Lin Ming didn't want to expose too much of himself, lest Sheng Mei produce too many associations about who he truly was. If Lin Ming couldn't use continuous spear strikes at Sheng Mei's weakest point to break through, then he would use an increasingly wild barrage of attacks instead. Spear after spear. In a moment, Lin Ming had already thrust out 100 times, like flowers in a storm. Sheng Mei felt her arm go numb. She suddenly froze. Peng, more and more runes burst apart in the skies. Sheng Mei's hair wildly danced in the air as her eyebrows pressed tightly together. Lin Ming had taken the initiative against her. And as for her, she actually felt strained. What shocked her the most was that at this point, Lin Ming hadn't used brute force to suppress her, but had used his understandings of the laws. How could this be? Although Lin Ming's following attacks seemed wild and ferocious, the truth was that his attacks avoided the strongest sections of her own. The only difference was that it wasn't as exquisite as his first spear strike. Hum, hum, hum. Crazy and fierce spear strikes stirred up a savage tornado in the middle of the abyssal force field. The wind pressure tore through the air, colliding with the force field and causing it to moan. The hellish pressure released by the 2 fighters on stage caused some of the weaker abyssal disciples watching to feel pressure. Some of them had no choice but to summon the demon power within them to resist it. Humph! Deep King Rhodes, Elder Deep, Epic coldly coughed. He raised up his own force field, allowing these weaker abyssal disciples to catch their breath. But at this time, Elder Deep Epic's complexion was considerably ugly. Even being suppressed by the 12 totem poles, this ancient Aeon Sect's 9th Elder was still able to display such might in his attacks. Just where had he come from? If things were to continue like this, then it wouldn't be long before this 9th Elder surpassed him in strength. If this 9th Elder wished to marry Sheng Mei, then perhaps that wouldn't be bad at all. The best result would be that Deep King Road would gain yet another top-proud elite of heaven. In the future, this ninth elder could stand by Sheng Mei, and the two could dominate the abyss. But the crux of the issue was, could he be of the same mind as Sheng Mei? All sorts of thoughts flashed through Elder Deep Epic's mind. And at this time atop the stage, Lin Ming had already occupied the winning side. The Black Dragon Spear continued in an unstoppable offensive, an onslaught that flowed forwards like liquid mercury. As for Sheng Mei, she was forced to retreat again and again, and the life and death laws atop her sword light had already been scattered by Lin Ming. Chapter 21-25, 9 Revolution Red Lotus. Chapter 21-25, 9 Revolution Red Lotus. Kacha? Life and death runes shattered, causing a rain of light to fall from the skies. Sheng Mei had condensed the holy scripture laws onto her sword. Now, with her sword strike broken by Lin Ming, the Black Dragon Spear continued to push forwards, thrusting straight towards the point between Sheng Mei's eyebrows. Sheng Mei had already been forced into a dead end of the Deep King force field, without any way to retreat, and the powerful energy that Lin Ming released also locked down the surrounding void, so that the space laws couldn't be used. In this moment, Lin Ming suddenly slapped the Black Dragon Spear in his hands, crazily pouring demon energy into it. A bone dragon form from demon energy formed on the ferocious spear shaft. It wildly roared and hurtled towards Sheng Mei with unstoppable momentum, wanting to swallow her whole. In this critical moment, many abyssals cried out in alarm. Some even thought that Sheng Mei might perish beneath the strike, a fragrant jade that would shatter to pieces. After all, the scene occurring on the stage of battle was like a massive demonic flame about to burn away an exquisite feather, strong against weak, hideous against beautiful. This intense visual impact shocked the mind. This ninth elder of the ancient Ian sect was too terrifying. In front of him, even the invincible Sheng Mei seemed delicate. Who? Demonic flames rolled upwards. In that instant, Sheng Mei closed her eyes. She no longer dodged, and nor could she. Between her eyes, the 9-petal lotus flower mark began to spin. A faint source of energy began to appear from within, as if a world was being bred within it. Time came to a standstill, just as the fierce dragon spear was 3 inches away from the point between Sheng Mei's eyebrows. A brilliant black, demonic light burst out, weaving together into a massive lotus flower pattern. Every flower petal seemed to form its own small world, each one filled with birth and destruction. Sheng Mei's grand reincarnation art was far more thorough than Lin Ming's. After this lotus flower formed, every flower petal had condensed the power of desire and hope from each one of Sheng Mei's reincarnations. The 9 revolution lotus flower spinning, this was the same as 9 Sheng Mice striking out together. Kacha. The Black Dragon Spear thrust into the heart of the 9 revolution red lotus. The spear shaft curved, but it wasn't able to go any further. Then Sheng Mei moved. That strange and mysterious bone sword fused into her arms. Sheng Mei's 5 slender fingers gathered together as she thrust an arm towards Lin Ming's chest. With the bone sword entering her body, sword and man had become one. Sheng Mei's sword fingers directly shattered the roiling demonic flames that surrounding Lin Ming. That bone dragon gave a screeching howl before it burst apart. Sheng Mei's fingers were bathed in the light of the 9 revolution red lotus. Lin Ming's heart shook, and he quickly withdrew the demon power he sent out through the demon avatar before storming backwards. However, Sheng Mei's sword fingers were too fast. They instantly pierced through the void and shot past Lin Ming's protective demon essence, soon about to penetrate his body. Even though Lin Ming's demon avatar had an incredibly intense mortal body, it would still suffer heavy losses if pierced through by these sword fingers. This was because Sheng Mei's sword fingers wouldn't simply pierce through him, but the terrifying strength and laws contained within them would also have to be withstood by his body. If that were to occur, victory and defeat would be settled. In that spark of time, Lin Ming crossed his arms in front of his chest, using the bone blades on his elbows to resist Sheng Mei's attack. Kacha! The sword point struck the edge of Lin Ming's elbow bone blades. On Lin Ming's arms, the 3-foot-long bone blades shattered into pieces. The sword fingers continued without stopping, piercing through Lin Ming's scales and passing through his right arm. But relying on this brief resistance, Lin Ming also changed the trajectory of the sword fingers. The sword light finally shot into Lin Ming's left shoulder. Blood shot out. Lin Ming grimaced. The strength contained in these sword fingers wasn't simple at all. It included the life and death laws. The strength of the sword fingers broke into his body and turned into sword energy. This sword energy was able to grow continuously, and it recklessly shredded apart the energy within Lin Ming's body. Even so, this sword energy didn't weaken much. This naturally originated from the laws of life. At the same time, the sword energy was incredibly tyrannical, absorbing Lin Ming's vitality with overbearing might as it exhausted his blood and withered his muscles. The life and death laws were used together. If an ordinary abyssal were to be touched by just a little bit of this strength, they would have likely lost all combat efficiency. Even Lin Ming felt severe pain rack his body. The meridians within his body became disorderly, as if all of them were about to break apart. His body was sent rapidly tumbling backwards 1,000 feet beneath the force of impact. Bang! With a loud crash, Lin Ming struck the light barrier of the Deep King force field, causing it to violently tremble. Lin Ming coughed up a mouthful of blood. Grabbing the Black Dragon spear, his giant body plummeted onto the Deep King wheel. Gudong! The Deep King wheel wildly shook. Lin Ming lifted his head upwards. He never thought that while Sheng Mei was being pressed backwards, so much she would still be capable of using such a move. However, Sheng Mei, who had seemed like an otherworldly fairy, had also paled slightly. It was obvious that it hadn't been easy for her to use the strength of 9 reincarnations just now. Did the grand reincarnation art also have such an effect? To condense the power of will and hope from 9 reincarnations and seal it between the eyebrows, and then have it erupt at the same time, the strength that could be released was several times that of usual. This was an extremely terrifying move. Lin Ming's grand reincarnation art was one that he perceived himself, and not the original that was created by the master of the Holy Scripture. Thus, it had extreme differences with Sheng Mei's version. Even so, Lin Ming was well aware that the grand reincarnation art was incredibly difficult, and the 8th and 9th revolution would be even more so. The reason Sheng Mei could transform so much and fight a lower true divinity with her Empyrean limit cultivation, this was likely due to her being able to complete the 9th revolution of the grand reincarnation art. In terms of the Holy Scripture laws, Sheng Mei could be called someone that had reached the pinnacle, but Lin Ming's Holy Scripture and Heavenly Sutra veered off in opposite directions, one focused on the inner universe and one focused on the outer universe. Compared to Sheng Mei, who strode down a single path, Lin Ming was naturally behind her. Lin Ming didn't know Sheng Mei's exact age, but he could estimate that she was probably tens of thousands of years old for her to arrive at this step with her age. This meant she had a chance of coming close to the boundary of those like the Immortal Sovereign and Azure Roadmaster in the future. However, as Lin Ming is astonished, so was Sheng Mei. That 9 revolution red lotus she used just now was one of her ultimate killing moves. Once she used it, even a lower true divinity abyssal might die. This was not being defeated or wounded, but possibly being killed. Sheng Mei didn't want to reveal such a technique on the stage, but Lin Ming was simply far too formidable. With her not being able to gain an upper hand after using her previous moves, she could only use this one. She didn't think that this move would be able to grievously wound Lin Ming. She only wanted to use it to ensure victory. But the result was that after this strike, nothing seemed to have happened to Lin Ming at all. He immediately stood up. Moreover, Sheng Mei's perception was connected to the sword energy she sent out. She felt that the originally endlessly growing sword energy that should have been able to swallow Lin Ming's vitality was in turn swallowed by him instead. Within Lin Ming's body, there seemed to be some black vortex that could tear apart all. It slowly annihilated her strength, and even the highest laws of the Holy Scripture were slowly undone. How had he done this? As she recalled Lin Ming breaking apart her life-reaping sword, Sheng Mei felt increasingly in disbelief of what had occurred. This higher abyssal had actually managed to achieve such a boundary in the perception of laws. Was this because of his talent, or was it perhaps related to that eye between his eyebrows? Sheng Mei couldn't imagine just what sort of bloodline could be heaven-defying to such a degree. Not only was Sheng Mei shocked, but the elders of Deep King Road were also restless. They all knew how potent Sheng Mei's final 9 revolution Red Lotus was. Even Elder Deep Epic would have to be careful facing such a strike, yet Lin Ming had blocked it. This fellow not only reached the pinnacle in strength and speed, but he even defied all common reasoning in the laws. This was simply incomprehensible. And at this time, something left the abyssals watching even more speechless. From the wounds on Lin Ming's arm and shoulder, the muscles began to wriggle. The demon avatar was beginning to reveal its fearsome defensive and regenerative capabilities. Sheng Mei's sword fingers had contained the power of will and hope of 9 reincarnations. If an ordinary abyssal were to touch just a little of it, they would fall over dead. Yet Lin Ming was actually beginning to slowly restore his body. This was too ridiculous. Sheng Mei's eyes widened, and a serious pressure fell over her heart. She had a premonition that this battle would be incomparably difficult, and there was even a chance that she could lose. And if she lost, then that mean she would have to dual cultivate with this monster? Thinking of this, Sheng Mei's stomach tumbled as if she wanted to vomit. Even though she felt something special about Lin Ming, even though there was a strange connection she sensed, she absolutely couldn't accept sharing a bed with this monster. To her, this was as bad as being killed. Chapter 21-26. The finale. Chapter 21-26. The finale. For a time, the atmosphere on stage turned solemn. All the abyssals had fallen silent. Lin Ming and Sheng Mei stood apart from each other, their gazes steady. Lin Ming's mortal body began to slowly regenerate. The abyssal's presence stared blankly on as Lin Ming's arm wound nearly stitched itself back together, and they couldn't sit still anymore. What is Her Highness the Holy Demoness doing? How come she's not doing anything, and is just watching that fellow's body repair itself? What use is there in talking about any sort of martial arts honor? Then again, this was a fair battle to begin with, and that 9th elder was injured by the Holy Demoness, so attacking him while he's down is completely justified. So how come the Holy Demoness hasn't attacked? A young abyssal anxiously asked. Most of the abyssals here were Sheng Mei's supporters, and only a few of them wished that Lin Ming could win. It isn't that Her Highness the Holy Demoness doesn't wish to attack, but that she cannot attack. The Holy Demoness consumed a considerable amount of energy just now, so how could she fight again so soon? An older abyssal said. By this point, the battle had reached a burning hot stage. Lin Ming and Sheng Mei's battle just now had exchanged wound for wound. If they continued to fight, if this battle became any more brutal, then There would be dire combat techniques that came out next, such as someone burning their source soul force or blood essence as the price for greater strength. And in this competition, this sort of behavior was against the rules. After all, this was only a mere comparison of skills to begin with, and not a life or death slaughter. Any moves that caused permanent losses or where both sides were forced to perish together were forbidden, because if one person used such a technique, then everyone else would too, and the gains simply weren't worth the losses. As the older Abyssal spoke, everyone looked toward Sheng Mei. At this time, a continuously growing strength rose up within her, slowly supplementing her strength. Just now, she had used her 9 Revolution Red Lotus, fusing together the power of hope and desire from 9 reincarnations. This was tantamount to 9 Sheng Mice attacked together, and thus the amount of demon power that she consumed was 9 times that of her all-out attack. If an ordinary martial artist or Abyssal were to use such an attack, then they would nearly exhaust themselves to nothing. However, Sheng Mei had only slightly paled, and her strength was slowly recovering. This was because with the power of life from the Holy Scripture laws, Sheng Mei's blood vitality and physical strength were able to last much longer and restore themselves faster than those of a martial artist of the same level. As this scene fell into the eyes of the Abyssals present, they were all numb with amazement. Lin Ming's regenerative abilities were astonishing, but so were Sheng Mei's. Lin Ming and Sheng Mei, they were nothing but 2 monsters. Not only did they possess terrifying strength laws and speed, but their endurance was also at abnormal levels. If one wished to fight against such freaks, then one couldn't have any weakness at all, because these 2 had no weakness, and any weakness one possessed would become the reason for defeat. In the entire Dark Abyss, just who would dare compete with them? I will not lose here. Sheng Mei glared at Lin Ming, her icy eyes shimmering. Whoever could defeat her at the same boundary could dual cultivate with her. These were words spoken by her own mouth and confirmed by Deep King Road. It was impossible for her to go back on her words. She didn't wish to compromise with Lin Ming, and compromise was likely useless to begin with. She could only put forth everything she had in this battle, and use the endlessly growing strength within her body to drain Lin Ming dry of strength. And coincidentally, Lin Ming also had such a plan. Sheng Mei's killing move was the 9 Revolution Red Lotus, and this was something that Lin Ming simply wasn't able to deal with right now. Once they fought, then he would surely be injured. The only positive part of this was that Sheng Mei couldn't utilize this move multiple times because it consumed too much energy. Thus, Lin Ming prepared to use his strength to outlast Sheng Mei and achieve victory in the end. Lin Ming knew that Sheng Mei had the laws of life to rely on, but Lin Ming was even more confident in what he relied on because he still had his true self within his demon avatar. Lin Ming couldn't use his true self to fight, thus he couldn't do anything to Sheng Mei right now because he couldn't display his peak strength. However, Lin Ming's true self resided in his demon avatar's inner world, and he could continuously transmit strength into his avatar's body. In terms of endurance, who could compete with him? This was the same as 2 fighting against 1. Moreover, the 2 of them had abnormal levels of endurance. As long as the fight continued at a steady pace, then he would emerge victorious in the end. After an incense stick of time passed, Lin Ming could feel that his wounds had more or less healed. Then he moved. When he moved this time, he didn't even use the black dragon spear, but simply punched out with his fist. His fist was like a meteor, thundering down onto Sheng Mei's chest. Wong, wong, wong. Abyssal laws condensed into a vortex of runes around Lin Ming's fist, forming an all-swallowing black hole. Several blood dragons rushed out from this black hole, roaring and snapping their jaws at Sheng Mei. Each of these blood dragons contained the power of swallowing. In truth, they were similar to Famine's tentacles, swallowing laws. All of the Abyssals watching could see this clearly. In the dark abyss, only a small minority of higher abyssals could grasp this tyrannical and overbearing law which allowed one to swallow the strength of others for one's own use, to swallow the flesh and blood of others as one's own nourishment. This was an extremely cruel and evil law, one envied by all abyssals. This brat, how can he understand the swallowing laws? Everything good has been taken by him. At this time, no one doubted Lin Ming's bloodline. For him to possess the swallowing laws was well within reason, because the swallowing laws were one of the signs of a higher abyssal. Facing these blood dragon tentacles, Sheng Mei didn't dodge. Her delicate eyebrows furrowed together, and the sword in her hands came slashing down, severing all the tentacles. Ca. Sword light radiated outwards. Blood flew out into the air. Sheng Mei had already planned to engage Lin Ming in a battle of endurance. Thus, she naturally wouldn't let go of any chances to exchange attacks with him. She believed that with her laws supporting her, she would eventually be the one to persist until the end. Lin Ming was truly abnormal, but in this aspect, he might not be able to compare with her. Moreover, when comparing endurance, the truth was that it was also a battle of willpower. If one possessed great willpower, this often allowed them to surpass their own limits. Sheng Mei was confident in her own willpower, because no matter what, she could not lose this battle. She no longer had an escape path left open to her. She didn't dare to imagine herself being pressed down beneath the gigantic body of this abyssal, and just how disgusting and stomach-wrenching that would be. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The intense collision stirred up raging waves of energy and caused the light barrier of the deep king force field to violently tremble. In a breath of time, Lin Ming and Sheng Mei exchanged over 100 moves. They fought speed with speed and didn't pause their onslaught against each other. They tried to preserve as much strength even as they tried to use up their opponent's strength. This was a short but furious battle that was extremely taxing on their energy. At this time, both Sheng Mei and Lin Ming naturally discovered each other's plans. They had come up with the same idea to win. Sheng Mei's eyes lit up with blazing fighting intent, and the corners of her lips curved up in a smile. And while Lin Ming's eyes remained indifferent, his heart was filled with confidence. They both brimmed with confidence because they both believed in their secret cards that gave them endurance. As the fight heated up, it became increasingly intense and savage. Many abyssals only saw a great storm rise up within the deep king force field. But as for the exact process of the fight, none of them were able to clearly see what was occurring. They are comparing endurance. It seems that the difference in strength between the two of them is too minor, so neither can do anything to the other. Thus they have decided to use time to settle victory and defeat. An abyssal elder said on the side of Deep King Road, "Her Highness the Holy Demoness possesses a horrifying level of endurance, let alone abyssals at the same level. Even true divinity-level abyssals might not be able to compare with her. But her opponent is also a monster. From him, it seems anything is possible. Her Highness, the Holy Demoness, might not be able to win," another elder of Deep King Road said. In Deep King Road, the status of the members present was decided by strength. This elder's status was below Sheng Mei's. Thus, when he spoke of her, he had to use a respectful tone. But at this time, Deep Epic chuckled. He said, "The battle has already gone this far, and I'm beginning to see things differently. Perhaps losing might not be a bad thing at all." "Oh, you are meaning?" "The ancient Ian sect doesn't know where the ninth elder comes from either. After this battle, we will look up more information on him. The truth is that if the Holy Demoness doesn't marry for the rest of her life, that isn't a plan at all. Although she might not care about it, her bloodline is so excellent. If it isn't inherited by her descendants, then wouldn't it just be wasted? We have to find a way to marry her off. And if my Deep King Road's Holy Demoness were to marry, then if we look through the entire dark abyss, just who can match up with her?" This ninth elder came out of nowhere, And although I might not like him too much, I have to acknowledge that he is the best possible candidate." As Deep Epic spoke, the other elders nodded in agreement. Indeed, this was true. In their eyes, Lin Ming was truly an indisputable top choice. The Dark Abyss was a land that revered powerhouses above all. And if a higher abyssal like Lin Ming wished to choose someone to marry, then there would be countless abyssal women who would desperately flock to him. In the abyss, powerful and rugged abyssals, those with towering and thick builds, if they possessed enough strength, then they were far more welcomed than the pretty and handsome male incubuses amongst the succubus demon race. And Lin Ming's strength, his ferocious and bulging muscles, all of that was perfectly aligned with this point. However, they never imagined that Sheng Mei was simply unable to accept the aesthetic sense of the abyssal demons. She absolutely could not. Chapter 21-27a. The finale. Chapter 21-27a. The finale. On the Deep King wheel, Lin Ming and Sheng Mei's battle continued. The two of them maintained their extreme speed. Every time they exchanged moves was like a collision of planets. Sheng Mei's wings stretched out. Howling gales wrapped around her body, her figure drifting in an unpredictably bizarre fashion. Whoosh! The black dragon spear cut through the void, savagely tearing towards Sheng Mei's chest and piercing through. In that moment, the hearts of many abyssals tightened. But in the next moment that Sheng Mei vanished, leaving behind only the black dragon spear, it had been nothing more than an afterimage. The true Sheng Mei had already appeared behind Lin Ming. Her sword came falling down, sword light recklessly gushing out like a black tide, tumbling and roaring. In that instant, from within the inner world of Lin Ming's demon avatar, the heretical god tree appeared. The air filled with demonic energy as a bone tree drilled towards the heavens. Demonic fire and thunder howled out, tainted with the power of demons as it welcomed the turbulent sword light. Bang! The sword light and Lin Ming's demon power exploded and vanished together. Lin Ming didn't even turn his head. The black dragon spear came roaring out behind, the spear point drawing a full moon as he struck out in a circle. Sheng Mei's body was blown away like a flower petal by this horrific strength. Her protective demon essence violently shook, and she couldn't help but gather her wings together to resist Lin Ming's strike. Whoosh! Beneath the tremendous impact force, Sheng Mei was sent hurtling away like a meteor. She crashed into the Deep King force field's light barrier, but before the abyssals watching could even cry out in alarm, her figure instantly disappeared. And in the next moment, the black dragon spear struck the area Sheng Mei had just vanished from. A terrifying explosion rang out once more. The fierce intensity of this battle left the abyssals watching dizzy with wonder. Most of the abyssals present were simply unable to see the fighting process between Sheng Mei and Lin Ming, only the constantly shivering Deep King force field, and the flashes of shadows all around the light barrier reminded them just how cruel and savage this battle was. Time marched on. 2 hours for hours. This intense fight continued for all this time without a single chance for anyone to catch their breath. Every move was met head-on with equally terrifying resilience. Lin Ming and Sheng Mei both relied on their potent restorative abilities to continue this battle. As time passed, Sheng Mei felt more and more alarmed. This battle had indeed gone as she had expected. It beat on with a rhythm of dragging on the battle, with both parties being drained of energy. But although this was the process she expected, it might not be the result she expected. Lin Ming's endurance was simply far too dreadful. If anyone were to consume energy at such a rate, then let alone an Empyrean-level abyssal, even a true divinity might have already been completely exhausted like a dried-up oil lamp. But Lin Ming was able to continue onwards, even becoming increasingly brutal as the battle raged on. Sheng Mei's strength, on the other hand, was being weakened. Although the Holy Scripture laws were heaven-defying, the so-called endlessly growing still had its limits. If the battle continued like this, then the first one to fall over might be herself. Sheng Mei's speed had already slowed down. This scene fell into the eyes of all the abyssals watching. In terms of endurance, Deep King Rhodes, Holy Demoness, was unexpectedly losing to the ancient Ian Sec's ninth elder. Endurance was an important aspect of a martial artist's strength. In truth, from the very start, from feeling alone, Lin Ming consumed more energy than Sheng Mei did. This was because, in terms of his size, the might of his moves, all of it used more strength than Sheng Mei. Even so, the first one who wouldn't be able to persist was Sheng Mei. CA. Another ray of sword light slashed down towards Lin Ming before being scattered by his strength. The moment the sword light shattered, the black dragon spear in Lin Ming's hands thrust out like a viper straight towards Sheng Mei's left rib. This was an extremely tricky attack angle. However, Sheng Mei didn't dodge. Her left wing suddenly spread out and cut down at the black dragon spear. Kacha! The sound of a fierce collision rang out. From the surface of the black dragon spear, chips of bone scattered out, but Sheng Mei's left wing had nearly been pierced through by the black dragon spear and was now dripping with blood. In that moment, Lin Ming's eyes flashed with surprise. Sheng Mei had relied on nearly just the strength of her mortal body to resist this strike, and didn't use her demon power at all. Otherwise, her wing wouldn't have been torn by his spear strike. But then, Sheng Mei stretched out her arm and grabbed hold of the black dragon spear. Her delicate and exquisite jade-white arm wrapped around the thick black dragon spear, clasping the shaft right beneath her arm. Ka, 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 ka. All around Sheng Mei, the void shattered. An ice phoenix howled out and threw itself onto the black dragon spear. For a time, the black dragon spear began to rapidly freeze over, and as for Lin Ming, who was gripping it, he suddenly paused. Cold energy recklessly rushed into Lin Ming's body from all directions. Sheng Mei had released her deep ice force field once more, but this time the force field had been reduced to the smallest area possible, all of it compressed onto Lin Ming's body. Without a doubt, she was risking everything on this move. From between Sheng Mei's eyebrows, the 9 revolutions red lotus began to shine brilliantly. The void seemed to overlap and shiver. The revolving lotus flower once again manifested into 9 revolutions of worlds. When these worlds were joined together, one could see mountains and rivers within them, plants and beasts and birds, a billion lives being born and destroyed. Within each world sat a cross-legged Sheng Mei. This was the power of hope and desire of Sheng Mei's 9 reincarnations. The 9 Sheng Mice gathered their hands together in prayer, their expressions one of supreme reverence. In that moment, their power of hope and desire gathered together, forming a golden river of stars that crashed down atop Lin Ming. Was this the final move? Lin Ming's pupils shrank. Sheng Mei didn't hesitate to suffer injuries in order to seal away his movement. All of this was in order to keep him at a close distance where she could use the 9 revolutions red lotus to engage in a final showdown with him. This was because she had discovered that in terms of endurance, she might not be able to overcome him. This time, seeing the 9 revolutions of worlds form into sword light that slashed down on him, Lin Ming's heart and mind were as still as water. From his inner world, the blood of Azura began to burn. Even Lin Ming's 3 avatars of essence, energy, and divine poured their strength into the demon avatar without reserve. A blinding radiance burst out from Lin Ming's eyes. In his inner world, the Azura wheel was fused with and covered by the power of demons. Then the Azura wheel turned into a giant demon wheel that rose up from behind Lin Ming. Wild demon power filled the air. A peerless demon appeared, slowly pushing the wheel forwards. This was the demon phantom formed by the Azura Phantom. The wheel contained thousands and millions of great demons roaring within. Inside, there was also the flesh and blood essence of the totem-level abyssal demon, Famine. As this demon wheel revolved, Lin Ming used both his hands and pushed outwards. Lin Ming had poured all of his strength into this demon wheel, and now it welcomed Sheng Mei's 9 revolutions Red Lotus. Ka, 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 ka. Chapter 21-27b. The finale. Chapter 21-27b. The finale. The demon will cut down onto the 9 revolutions Red Lotus. Celestial bodies would be grinded apart by it, and even the river of time seemed to shake. During this fierce collision, the power of hope and desire from 9 reincarnations and the great demon will began to wear away at each other. The strength of all laws, every ray of light, space and time, beneath the impact of these 2 great strengths, everything seemed to stir up, forming visible beams of energy that fell down upon the deep King force field in torrents. The deep King force field's light barrier wildly shook. Because of the extended battle, the energy saved within the 12 totem poles was insufficient. Underneath this final impact, the deep King force field wasn't able to withstand the enormous destructive force, and a tiny gap was ripped open. Pung, 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 from all over the force field. The abyssal phantoms that covered the array formation's light barrier began to explode together. Beams of law lights gathered together, shooting out from deep King force field and recklessly spraying outwards. These light beams were energy blades formed by the collision of Lin Ming and Sheng Mei. Each one possessed a terrifying penetrating force, destroying wherever it went. "Be careful!" an abyssal cried out in alarm to some of the weaker abyssals. Any one of these light beams could easily pierce through them and take their lives. The younger abyssals quickly retreated, even taking out their weapons to fend off these light beams. But at this time, the true divinity-level elders actually stepped forwards. They summoned protective shields of demon power that blocked all the light beams. They actually drained dry the energy from the totem poles. This is just defying the heavens. Deep, Epic frowned. The Deep King force field was the sect-stabilizing array formation of Deep King Road. With Lin Ming and Sheng Mei's strength, they shouldn't have been able to break through it. However, they had actually managed to forcefully exhaust the energy contained in the array formation. At this time within the array formation, Lin Ming and Sheng Mei were in the center of the collision, both of them covered in blood. Sheng Mei's clothes were torn in numerous places. Her battle armor was broken and her long hair fluttered wildly about her. And Lin Ming was in an even more tragic state. His chest was smothered in blood. The 9 revolutions Red Lotus had been broken apart by the demon wheel, but as the 2 halves passed by him, it nearly split him in half. Although Lin Ming's wounds were heavier, he actually had more strength remaining. This was because within the inner world of Lin Ming's demon avatar, his true self and his 3 avatars were continuously supplying the demon avatar with energy. This was the source of Lin Ming's trump card. But in comparison, because Sheng Mei had already consumed a great deal of energy and the 9 revolutions Red Lotus she used once more, her face was already pale white. She had used up all her strength. Lin Ming roared out and grasped the black dragon spear. From beneath Sheng Mei's arm, the black dragon spear crazily shook. Kacha! The cold ice that froze over the shaft of the black dragon spear shattered, and even the bone armor atop the spear began to burst apart. Lin Ming violently dragged out the spear, pulling the black dragon spear out from the wreckage of broken ice and bone. Sheng Mei's delicate eyebrows pressed together, and a trace of blood dripped from the corners of her lips. The black dragon spear had been pulled out from beneath her right arm, and because of the shattered bone cutting her, as it was pulled out, her right side was covered in blood. Lin Ming's eyes flashed with a cold light. The power of the 9 stars of the Tao Palace boiled over from within him as he suddenly pierced out the spear. The spear point continued to tremble as the power of laws billowed outwards, shooting forth like a river of stars and releasing a terrifying brilliance that submerged Sheng Mei. Sheng Mei's pupils shrank. At this moment, she could feel death approach. This scene was fixed in the eyes of those watching for eternity. The light of laws that danced in the air was like faded flower petals fluttering downwards. As for Sheng Mei shrouded in light, she was a black butterfly that had transformed into a fairy maiden. Her long hair danced about her, and she barely managed to use her still movable left wing as a shield. Beneath this black wing, Sheng Mei's peerless looks were as cold and arrogant as a mountain of ice. Her eyes weren't focused on the spear that thrust towards her with cold brilliance, but the approaching Lin Ming's face. In her bright pupils, the image of Lin Ming was clearly reflected. This sight seemed to touch something in Lin Ming's heart. Just as the black dragon spear was about to stab into the point between Sheng Mei's eyebrows, Lin Ming turned his arm, changing the trajectory of the spear slightly, so that it passed Sheng Mei's cheek and turned out instead. Puff! Lin Ming's spear light stabbed into the Deep King force field's light barrier. The Deep King force field had originally been exhausted of energy, and was now no longer capable of resisting Lin Ming's strike. The black dragon spear directly pierced through it. Ka, ka, ka. Atop the barrier of light, cracks began to spread out like a spider web, proliferating at a rapid pace. In a mere moment, the egg-like light barrier burst apart. Energy fell down like rain, sprinkling down onto the world like the endless stars glittering in the skies. And in the inexhaustible rain of light, Lin Ming and Sheng Mei stood in the void. The black dragon spear's point was only 3 inches away from Sheng Mei's beautiful face, where it cut off a strand of her black hair. Time came to a standstill. Sheng Mei looked at Lin Ming, an indescribable look emerging in her eyes. She had been defeated. In a frontal battle, she had actually been defeated by a higher abyssal, who had a lower cultivation than she did. This truth was hard for her to accept. At this moment, an inexplicable feeling began to rise up in her heart. This abyssal that held the spear in front of her left her confused and muddled. Although he was close, she couldn't see through him at all. After the Deep King force field exploded, and while the rain of light was still silently falling, all around the battlefield the entire audience had fallen silent. The winner and loser of this battle was already clear to all. In that last spear strike, if Lin Ming hadn't held back, then Sheng Mei wouldn't even be able to stand there right now. He really won. The elders and disciples of the ancient Ian sect felt as if they were living a dream. Within the dark abyss, Deep King Road's holy demoness was no different from a living legend. But now that living legend had been beaten by an elder of their ancient Ian sect, and this elder had even jumped ranks to do so. Did this mean that their ancient Ian sect would develop a relationship of marriage with Deep King Road? As the disciples of the ancient Ian sect thought of the numerous rumors concerning Deep King Road's holy demoness, and as they recalled the countless higher abyssals that chased after her, they couldn't help but gulp. While they admired and envied Lin Ming at the same time, they felt that everything that just occurred was too fantastical. But as for the other small influences around the ancient Ian sect, they were so envious that their eyes turned red. However, none of them dared to speak out at this time. In the dark abyss, strength was the ultimate deterrence. Lin Ming had already proven his own strength. As long as he didn't perish, then in the future his accomplishments would even surpass those of Sheng Mei. Facing such a ruthless person who dared make snide remarks. In fact, The abyssals that taunted Lin Ming before began to feel weak at heart. They were all afraid that Lin Ming would remember their taunts. Her Highness the Holy Demoness really lost. A Deep King Road elder said with deep emotion, unsure of what feeling was in his heart. There was a bit of loss, but also a bit of expectation. Who could say what would happen in the future? What do we do? An elder asked Deep Epic. Deep Epic waved his hand, saying, we do what we have to do, and that is naturally to conduct the grand dual cultivation ceremony. But this matter needs to be reported to the higher-ups. The sovereign is secretive in his movements, a dragon that cannot be seen, so the report shouldn't be for him. Instead, report this matter to the great elder. In Deep King Road, above Deep Epic was an upper true divinity level abyssal elder. Besides Deep, this elder could be called the highest authority of Deep King Road. Chapter 21-28 Marriage. On the Deep King Wheel, the dense rain of light subsided. From all around, many of the surrounding disciples and elders of the abyssal influences had yet to respond. Then, many abyssals began to quietly discuss amongst themselves. To them, this scene was a dream they never would have imagined. Those from Deep King Road, are you ready to announce the end of the match? At this time, the great elder of the ancient Ian sect stood up, drawing the gaze of many nearby abyssals. Without a doubt, the ancient Ian sect had been able to feel proud and overjoyed, and even earned a great deal of face in front of everyone. There were many elders of large influences present who coveted the status of the ancient Ian sect. As they looked at Ian God, their complexions were filled with envy and unwillingness. The Deep King Road elder responsible for overseeing the competition awkwardly coughed. Then he stepped onto the Deep King Wheel and loudly announced, the battle has ended. The victor is the 9th elder of the ancient Ian sect. The stag remained silent. Many abyssals discovered that even until now, they didn't know what the name of this ancient Ian sect's 9th elder was. Then concerning marriage, I believe that everyone from Deep King Road will not forget, right? Ian God spoke out once more, looking towards the elders of Deep King Road before glancing over at Sheng Mei. At this time, the elders of Deep King Road all had various emotions written on their faces, and as for Sheng Mei, her complexion was paler than normal and Lin Ming's last strike because of the laws Lin Ming used, the strangely familiar aura, and finally Lin Ming suddenly holding back. A weird feeling began to surge in her heart. This was something that tickled her mind, yet she wasn't able to place a finger on it for a time. Sheng Mei thought she wanted to understand just where this strange feeling originated from. But after hearing Elder Ian God's words, everything she felt towards Lin Ming suddenly disappeared. And her pupils, Lin Ming's demonic incarnation was reflected in them. This fierce black monster had shattered scales all over his body, and the 2 bone blades that jutted out from his elbows had broken off. His entire body was covered in blood, and it seemed that his injuries were far more serious than her OWN AT this time. His dark brown eyes were also gazing back at her. Why now? Lin Ming had already undone the Azura body metamorphosis and had returned to a normal size. Of course, this was in comparison to the life forms of the 33 heavens. He was still towering and thickly built, and even though Sheng Mei was tall herself, she only reached just below Lin Ming's chest. Sheng Mei simply found this hard to accept, that this monster had defeated her and would soon obtain her. At this time, Elder Deep Epic laughed, and his foots came hurrying forwards. He appeared atop the Deep King Wheel, right between Lin Ming and Sheng Mei. What Elder Ian God said is correct. Since your sect's 9th elder has won, then we will naturally fulfill our side of the promise and allow our Deep King Road's holy demoness to marry your 9th elder in a grand dual cultivation ceremony. Elder Deep Epic readily agreed, causing the elders of smaller influences to be startled. As for the younger abyssals, They were despondent upon hearing this. Even if Sheng Mei didn't marry Lin Ming, they were clearly aware that it still wouldn't be their turn. But upon knowing that the most perfect goddess in the entire dark abyss would be ravaged by such a towering and ferocious abyssal demon, they still found this somewhat hard to accept. This sort of feeling was like seeing the most perfect thing in existence being polluted. As for Sheng Mei, her eyelids jumped up as she heard Elder Deep Epic's words. She looked at Lin Ming, but didn't speak. However, the light in her eyes clearly turned much colder. Elder Deep Epic is truly refreshing. Ian God laughed. Then, tomorrow, my ancient Ian sect will prepare a dowry gift to settle this marriage. How about it? Ha ha! Elder Ian God is too courteous. We can discuss this wedding further. After all, this must be a grand occasion for all of us. Elder Deep Epic didn't oppose Lin Ming marrying Sheng Mei. In his opinion, this would also be something beneficial to Deep King Road. Then, about the date of this marriage ceremony, Elder Ian God continued to say what he planned was to publicly confirm a marriage date so that they could avoid future nights of headaches, although Lin Ming had seemingly appeared from nowhere, and his victory of Sheng Mei had left all the abyssals bewildered. In the end, Lin Ming was still an elder of their ancient Ian sect. If the ancient Ian sect could use Lin Ming to climb the big tree that was Deep King Road, then Elder Ian God would absolutely love for this to occur. After all, the ancient Ian sect had suffered crisis after crisis, and countless influences were eyeing them, waiting for them to break apart so that they could be replaced. Elder Ian God is quite impatient. However, there is still some time until the demon god's tomb opens, so if we do hold the dual cultivation ceremony before then, although it may be a bit hastily done, I don't see any reason why we can't. Deep Epic rubbed his chin and looked at Lin Ming. According to any logical reasoning, it would be best for Lin Ming to emerge from the demon god's tomb before the grand dual cultivation ceremony was held. Since the demon god's tomb was filled with dangers, and anything could happen within, however, in Deep Epic's view, a peerless genius like Lin Ming would likely have a ridiculously tough life. At the very least, nothing should happen to him in the demon god's tomb. If they could hold the grand dual cultivation ceremony ahead of time, then this would be proof that Deep King Road trusted Lin Ming, and this would help them strengthen their relationship with Lin Ming in the future. Deep Epic and Ian God continued to agree with each other, seeming as if they would almost put the marriage on today's agenda, and by this time, Sheng Mei finally found it hard to remain calm. If she didn't say anything, then she feared that within several days she would have to marry Lin Ming in front of all these abyssals. It just so happened that because of the demon god's tomb, all of the influences that were connected to Deep King Road had gathered here. All of them had been sent written invitations. She sent a sound transmission to Lin Ming. I must speak with you. What is there to talk about? Lin Ming glanced at Sheng Mei, seeing her pale face. A strange feeling stirred in his heart. This was an extremely complex feeling, one that seemed to originate from dark feelings, from the pleasure of taking revenge. But inevitably, it also came from Lin Ming's unclear feelings about Sheng Mei. Lin Ming's deepest impression of Sheng Mei had been her cold and callous actions as she took his eternal soul and left, but when he had lost his strength and was completely dried up on the verge of death, it was in that moment that he felt the warmth and fullness brought about by Sheng Mei's source soul force and life essence. If it weren't for those things she left him, then he wouldn't have been able to understand the samsara of life and death before he perished, and he wouldn't have been able to comprehend the grand reincarnation art and slowly restore himself. Sheng Mei gave Lin Ming a life-saving grace. However, Lin Ming couldn't clearly see through her actions or reasons. This caused Lin Ming to subconsciously be on guard against her, not trusting her, but also caring for her because of his actions and the upcoming promise of dual cultivation. Sheng Mei was unable to maintain the cold arrogance of her heart. Instead, she nervous and panicked due to the upcoming agreement, and Lin Ming couldn't help but take pleasure in this sort of revenge. Even though Lin Ming had experienced so many things in his life, it was still hard for him to rid himself of this part of human nature. "Who are you? Where did you come from? What's your name?" Sheng Mei asked Lin Ming. "Who I am, where I come from, those aren't things you need to concern yourself with. As for my name, you can call me Ninth Elder." Lin Ming didn't plan to tell Sheng Mei about his own status. Even if he inwardly wanted to believe in Sheng Mei, she was still someone that worked from the Soul Emperor, and someone who had complicated relations with Deep King Road. There was even a chance that she was an abyssal demon, a mortal enemy to him, this sort of situation. Lin Ming couldn't guarantee that Sheng Mei wouldn't betray him if she were threatened by someone or tempted by something. For instance, if she were tempted by that peak of martial arts so longed for in her dreams, moreover, Lin Ming had a faint feeling that to a certain extent, Sheng Mei was being controlled by the Soul Emperor. At the very least, the Soul Emperor was aware of all her actions. In this case, if Sheng Mei were to know who he truly was, then it would be far too dangerous. After listening to Lin Ming's words, Sheng Mei frowned, clearly unsatisfied with his reply. After all, they would likely have to conduct the grand dual cultivation ceremony soon, and he wouldn't even tell her his name. "I want to make a deal with you," Sheng Mei icily said. She was already disinclined to banter with Lin Ming. The brief spell of goodwill towards him that had magically appeared from nowhere had disappeared. Even Sheng Mei couldn't clearly explain why she would have even the least bit of favorable impression towards this barbaric abyssal demon that was brimming over with an evil aura. "What kind of deal?" Lin Ming's eyes rose, his attention suddenly stirring. Chapter 21-28. Marriage. On the Deep King Wheel, the dense rain of light subsided. From all around, many of the surrounding disciples and elders of the abyssal influences had yet to respond. Then, many abyssals began to quietly discuss amongst themselves. To them, this scene was a dream they never would have imagined. Those from Deep King Road, "Are you ready to announce the end of the match?" At this time, the great elder of the ancient Ian sect stood up, drawing the gaze of many nearby abyssals. Without a doubt, the ancient Ian sect had been able to feel proud and overjoyed, and even earned a great deal of face in front of everyone. There were many elders of large influences present who coveted the status of the ancient Ian sect. As they looked at Ian God, their complexions were filled with envy and unwillingness. The Deep King Road elder responsible for overseeing the competition awkwardly coughed. Then he stepped onto the Deep King Wheel and loudly announced, "The battle has ended. The victor is the 9th elder of the ancient Ian sect." The stag remained silent. Many abyssals discovered that even until now, they didn't know what the name of this ancient Ian sect's 9th elder was. Then, concerning marriage, I believe that everyone from Deep King Road will not forget, right? Ian God spoke out once more, looking towards the elders of Deep King Road before glancing over at Sheng Mei. At this time, the elders of Deep King Road all had various emotions written on their faces, and as for Sheng Mei, her complexion was paler than normal. In Lin Ming's last strike, because of the laws, Lin Ming used the strangely familiar aura, and finally Lin Ming suddenly holding back, a weird feeling began to surge in her heart. This was something that tickled her mind, yet she wasn't able to place a finger on it. For a time, Sheng Mei thought she wanted to understand just where this strange feeling originated from. But after hearing Elder Ian God's words, everything she felt towards Lin Ming suddenly disappeared. In her pupils, Lin Ming's demonic incarnation was reflected in them. This fierce black monster had shattered scales all over his body, and the 2 bone blades that jutted out from his elbows had broken off. His entire body was covered in blood, and it seemed that his injuries were far more serious than her own. At this time, his dark brown eyes were also gazing back at her. By now, Lin Ming had already undone the Azura body metamorphosis and had returned to a normal size. Of course, This was in comparison to the life forms of the 33 heavens. He was still towering and thickly built, and even though Sheng Mei was tall herself, she only reached just below Lin Ming's chest. Sheng Mei simply found this hard to accept, that this monster had defeated her and would soon obtain her. Ha ha! At this time, Elder Deep Epic laughed, and his foots came hurrying forwards. He appeared atop the Deep King wheel, right between Lin Ming and Sheng Mei. What Elder Ian God said is correct. Since your sect's ninth elder has won, then we will naturally fulfill our side of the promise and allow our Deep King Road's holy demoness to marry your ninth elder in a grand dual cultivation ceremony. Elder Deep Epic readily agreed, causing the elders of smaller influences to be startled. As for the younger abyssals, they were despondent upon hearing this. Even if Sheng Mei didn't marry Lin Ming, they were clearly aware that it still wouldn't be their turn. But upon knowing that the most perfect goddess in the entire dark abyss would be ravaged by such a towering and ferocious abyssal demon, they still found this somewhat hard to accept. This sort of feeling was like seeing the most perfect thing in existence being polluted. As for Sheng Mei, her eyelids jumped up as she heard Elder Deep Epic's words. She looked at Lin Ming, but didn't speak. However, the light in her eyes clearly turned much colder. Elder Deep Epic is truly refreshing. Ian God laughed. Then, tomorrow, my ancient Ian sect will prepare a dowry gift to settle this marriage. How about it? Ha ha! Elder Ian God is too courteous. We can discuss this wedding further. After all, this must be a grand occasion for all of us. Elder Deep Epic didn't oppose Lin Ming marrying Sheng Mei. In his opinion, this would also be something beneficial to Deep King Road. Then, about the date of this marriage ceremony, Elder Ian God continued to say, what he planned was to publicly confirm a marriage date so that they could avoid future nights of headaches. Although Lin Ming had seemingly appeared from nowhere, and his victory of Sheng Mei had left all the abyssals bewildered, in the end, Lin Ming was still an elder of their ancient Ian sect. If the ancient Ian sect could use Lin Ming to climb the big tree that was Deep King Road, then Elder Ian God would absolutely love for this to occur. After all, the ancient Ian sect had suffered crisis after crisis, and countless influences were eyeing them, waiting for them to break apart so that they could be replaced. Ha ha! Elder Ian God is quite impatient. However, there is still some time until the demon god's tomb opens, so if we do hold the dual cultivation ceremony before then, although it may be a bit hastily done, I don't see any reason why we can't. Deep Epic rubbed his chin and looked at Lin Ming. According to any logical reasoning, it would be best for Lin Ming to emerge from the demon god's tomb before the grand dual cultivation ceremony was held, since the demon god's tomb was filled with dangers and anything could happen within. However, in Deep Epic's view, a peerless genius like Lin Ming would likely have a ridiculously tough life. At the very least, nothing should happen to him in the demon god's tomb. If they could hold the grand dual cultivation ceremony ahead of time, then this would be proof that Deep King Road trusted Lin Ming, and this would help them strengthen their relationship with Lin Ming in the future. Deep Epic and Ian God continued to agree with each other, seeming as if they would almost put the marriage on today's agenda. And by this time, Sheng Mei finally found it hard to remain calm. If she didn't say anything, then she feared that within several days, she would have to marry Lin Ming in front of all these abyssals. It just so happened that because of the demon god's tomb, all of the influences that were connected to Deep King Road had gathered here. All of them had been sent written invitations. She sent a sound transmission to Lin Ming. I must speak with you. What is there to talk about? Lin Ming glanced at Sheng Mei. Seeing her pale face, a strange feeling stirred in his heart. This was an extremely complex feeling, one that seemed to originate from dark feelings, from the pleasure of taking revenge. But inevitably, it also came from Lin Ming's unclear feelings about Sheng Mei. Lin Ming's deepest impression of Sheng Mei had been her cold and callous actions as she took his eternal soul and left. But when he had lost his strength and was completely dried up on the verge of death, it was in that moment that he felt the warmth and fullness brought about by Sheng Mei's source, soul force, and life essence. If it weren't for those things she left him, then he wouldn't have been able to understand the samsara of life and death before he perished, and he wouldn't have been able to comprehend the grand reincarnation art and slowly restore himself. Sheng Mei gave Lin Ming a life-saving grace. However, Lin Ming couldn't clearly see through her actions or reasons. This caused Lin Ming to subconsciously be on guard against her, not trusting her, but also caring for her. Because of his actions and the upcoming promise of dual cultivation, Sheng Mei was unable to maintain the cold arrogance of her heart. Instead, she nervous and panicked due to the upcoming agreement, and Lin Ming couldn't help but take pleasure in this sort of revenge. Even though Lin Ming had experienced so many things in his life, it was still hard for him to rid himself of this part of human nature. "Who are you? Where did you come from? What's your name?" Sheng Mei asked Lin Ming. "Who I am, where I come from, those aren't things you need to concern yourself with. As for my name, you can call me Ninth Elder." Lin Ming didn't plan to tell Sheng Mei about his own status. Even if he inwardly wanted to believe in Sheng Mei, she was still someone that worked from the Soul Emperor and someone who had complicated relations with Deep King Road. There was even a chance that she was an abyssal demon, a mortal enemy to him. In this sort of situation, Lin Ming couldn't guarantee that Sheng Mei wouldn't betray him if she were threatened by someone or tempted by something. For instance, if she were tempted by that peak of martial arts so longed for in her dreams. Moreover, Lin Ming had a faint feeling that, to a certain extent, Sheng Mei was being controlled by the Soul Emperor. At the very least, the Soul Emperor was aware of all her actions. In this case, if Sheng Mei were to know who he truly was, then it would be far too dangerous. After listening to Lin Ming's words, Sheng Mei frowned, clearly unsatisfied with his reply. After all, they would likely have to conduct the grand dual cultivation ceremony soon, and he wouldn't even tell her his name. "I want to make a deal with you," Sheng Mei icily said. She was already disinclined to banter with Lin Ming. The brief spell of goodwill towards him that had magically appeared from nowhere had disappeared. Even Sheng Mei couldn't clearly explain why she would have even the least bit of favorable impression towards this barbaric abyssal demon that was brimming over with an evil aura. "What kind of deal?" Lin Ming's eyes rose, his attention suddenly stirring. "You're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.